Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? It's kick off the conference. Awake, good. Feel free to step out, grab some more hydration. It's very warm here. Coming from Seattle, where we feel it's 80 degrees and really hot. Coming off the airplane yesterday of 113, my daughter was just, oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is so hot. Well, welcome. It's so nice to see some familiar faces, some new faces to our conference. Again, please feel free. This is a very informal, may feel formal, but the goal is for you to say hi to someone new. I challenge all of you, each of you, to say hi to maybe 5 people today and 5 people tomorrow, and leave this conference with an email or a cell phone number, or if you meet Dr. Byrne, maybe a Twitter handle, something to stay engaged and connected. My name is Helen Bean. I've been a member of the AOCA since medical school, so that's about, 15 plus years, showing my age, I guess. It's been a quick 15 years. There's a lot that has happened, but I feel like I just signed up and took my boards. It just shows you that this is a family, a work family, a professional society family, and it's helped my career tremendously, and I'm sure it has for a number of folks here. It is my pleasure to invite you all to the Emerging Professionals Program track at the AOCA Annual Convention here in Palm Springs. We have curated the educational content of the session specifically to address topics relevant to osteopathic medical students, residents and fellows interested in the specialty and subspecialties of anesthesiology. We're grateful to be joined by Drs. Matthias Franzen, Melissa Byrne, Natalie Coons, and Ms. Samantha Bunk, and of course, Ms. Elizabeth Gray, and I'm excited to personally start today's session. I currently serve as Chief of Department of Anesthesiology at Virginia Mason Medical Center in Seattle, Washington. Former to that role, I was Program Director of the Residency Program. I obviously gave that role up once I took the role of Chair last year, so it's exactly a year anniversary. I also hold appointments at the University of Washington, the long name, but the medical school at Washington State University, and the Morehouse School of Medicine. And what that means is, as a faculty educator, you get to submit an application and get an appointment at these medical training programs. I completed my residency at Riverside University Health System, which isn't too far from here. So you will meet a lot of folks from my training program, and I encourage you to do so. And prior to getting my first job up in Seattle, I completed Advanced Clinical Anesthesia Fellowship at Stanford University. If you guys don't know what that is, just find me and I'm happy to discuss. And a native of California, so I've been in this area before. Santa Barbara is always my forever home. Just to highlight that aspect, because training and life will take you anywhere. So it's more important than ever to stay connected. The title was hard because everything you need to know about ERAS and MATCH, you guys are very smart individuals. I'm sure you can write the book on this as we speak. The idea is to, I'm not going to call anyone out, and if I do, I apologize, but the idea to have discussion and dialogue and use folks in this room as consultation advice or just to bat off some ideas with. Now, I do have some disclosures. Obviously, this is not meant to say, hey, you come to this lecture, this talk, you'll absolutely match. That's just, but we want to provide you the tools to succeed, whatever that means in your journey. The objectives of this talk, this presentation, is to go over, not to go into too much detail, but what is the AAMC? What is ERAS? What is the NRMP? ERAS timelines and fees, navigating ERAS, how to obtain letters of recommendations and strong letters of recommendations, how to select your top 10 experiences. And if you haven't seen ERAS yet, first of all, how many MS3s? Awesome. MS4s? Awesome. And then residents? Fellows? Great. So this may not apply to the residents, wholeheartedly, but just know, students, that you have some residents in the room as well. I cannot emphasize the personal statement, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but how to really hone in and capitalize on your personal statement. The signaling system, interviews, of course, Dr. Burns is going to talk about that, and really using some time, probably 30 minutes or so, on questions. Why me? Why this topic? As I mentioned in my introduction, I was the former program director, and prior to that, I was APD for about a year. I took over as PD April 1st, 2020. So that was when things started to shut down. People are talking about, airlines are going to cancel their flights, and they certainly did right around that time. And so as a new PD, I just remember just not really having a breakdown, but it's like, how am I going to have a residency program when the residents are not really doing clinical work? So this was applying to every program across the country, of course. During my tenure, there was an onset of the signaling system. So at first, there was no gold or silver application to it. It was just a bulk number of 15 for anesthesia. The year after, they went on to the gold, or I think it was 2 years after, they went on to gold and silver based on the learnings of ERAS and feedback from the programs. Each year, I read through about, I would say, 1,000 letters of recommendation a year, and I say 1,000 because you will submit at least 3. Zoom interviews, the onset of Zoom interviews, that was a big learning curve, and I think a lot of the faculty, a lot of folks in private practice join this organization and stay here because we all want you to succeed, whatever that may be. Anesthesia, as you know, is the trend of competition, is in a sense, has increased, surprisingly, since COVID. But anesthesia, a lot of people want to go into that specialty, whether they've done a rotation or whether they feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And as you guys know, you and I know that you may not really know what anesthesia, the practice of anesthesia, really means. But we want you to succeed. In reflecting my own application, I would never have matched. So it just shows you the competitiveness, the pool. You're competing with the best of the best, which is great for a specialty in the future of healthcare. But we're just going to talk about tools and aspects you can apply on your own application. ERAS, who does not know what ERAS is and who has never heard of ERAS? Great. As a PD, this is when I really dug into, oh my gosh, ERAS is a pain during the pandemic. So I was thinking, okay, what is their incentive? What is the motive of ERAS to support the programs and the applicants? It's really to streamline all the paperwork, make sure it's vetted, confidential, meaning student A can't share the information and hack the information of another student. And the programs are doing in a very equitable process. The cool thing about this year, again, I'm not a program director now, but I still listen to the feedback and the learnings from our current program director. You can look at the interview data. So you can compare yourself to successful applicants in the past who have received interviews. You can see the invitation rates based on your signaling. So how many of you are from New England area? 1, 2, okay, 3, but you're a resident, right? Okay, so you don't count, no offense. I'm assuming you're going to signal based on where you consider home or where you want to go, correct? So if you're from New England, if you really want to go to, I don't know, Duke, you're probably going to use that part of the country. I believe there's still 9 geographical signals. If you want to go to UCLA, that was your dream school or program. If you're coming from Boston, you're probably going to signal the California area. So funny story, I'm going to just share a really funny story just to break it up a bit. I rented a car with budget, and I've never driven an electric car. Is that like the new thing? Everyone drives electric. Anyways, they said, we have a F-150 for you that's electric. I'm like, I have no idea how to drive an electric car. I said, can you just give me a manual, a stick shift or something? And so this is just my ongoing dialogue with technology. Anyways, I turn on the car and I'm thinking, It's not on. Press the button again. I'm like, wait a second, it's not going. I ended up turning it off, and I turn it back on, and there's a big sign in the screen saying the car is on, right? It's just such a different set of rules and a feel for a car. So I'll apply it to this case. I'm just a newbie to PowerPoint. Any questions so far about kind of ERAS and the big picture of why we pay for these services? Going to payment, the ERAS fee schedule has changed quite a bit. And the idea is to discourage applicants to apply to 100 programs, 30 programs. But you and I know, if you guys are saving money on flights and hotels and meals are expensive these days, that you're probably going to justify that. Instead of paying for a flight, I'm going to apply to 100 programs. And so when you do the cost analysis, my last year's PD, the average number of programs applicants applied to was about 76 or 78. That is about $1,600. So $1,600 to click boxes on your ERAS profile, click submit, give your credit card, okay? When you look at your travel expenses here, they're probably equitable to that. So my point with that is they're planned to make it more cost-friendly. It's not really working. People are still going to apply. Their argument is the cost has actually decreased. We've done work to make it more financially friendly for applicants. Again, I don't want to get into too much opinion here, but the decrease only encourages an increased number of applications being submitted. As program leadership, the volume ends up being extremely overwhelming. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. Signaling. Signaling is kind of like a dating service. Okay, this feels like a dating service. I've done them in the past, being frank. It's like, you're my number one. You're my number two. I'm okay with dating the number three, that type of thing. The programs think that they have nailed the rules. Like, oh, we've created rules that are so fair, and this is going to be perfect. And there's always a way for smart people like us in the room to navigate the rules and be competitive, right? Like, oh, I know the rules. I'm going to do gold here, geographic here. For the sake of those who don't know about signaling, there are program preferential signals and then geographical signals. Each specialty in medicine have a different set of rules. So if you're applying to derm and you're applying to anesthesia, it's very different. So people are nodding. And I know the fact is people probably apply to other specialties, emergency medicine, maybe IM, what's another popular overlap? Surgery, maybe. There is some benefit. I mean, there's incredible benefit to the signaling system. The benefit is that the system does think of those who cannot get a home or an away rotation. So if I was a student and I really wanted to go to University of Washington, but I'm from California, let's say I'm from Riverside, right? A medical school in Riverside or Palm Springs. I'll call it the Palm Springs Medical School, and I want to apply to University of Washington in Seattle. University of Washington is very selective with their own students. So they will prioritize their huge class of MS3 students who are applying for clerkships. And if they really want to stay in the region, they'll apply for a home rotation. But that pool in itself is very competitive. For that applicant to be super competitive, for their own, sense of comfort, they're going to apply for an away rotation. For DO schools, we don't have very many home rotations, so we rely on away rotations, whether it's a major medical university or a private practice. ERAS and the WMC recognize that, and so they said, let's go to a signal system because of trickle effects of COVID, financial burden. And so you can say, I'm not going to put all my effort into a rotation. I'm just going to signal. So there have been successes with that. I was talking about derm and anesthesia. Some have the Olympic gold medal, silver medal designation. Some just have a broad number of signals. So keep that in mind if you're going to cross cover specialties and apply to different programs. This is an interesting webinar from Representative ERAS. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate about what the golden system would be. Is it a small number of signals, a large number of signals, or a two-tier system? And they surveyed a bunch of students, active residents on this topic. So I'm going to go to the two-tier system because that applies to anesthesia. Believe it or not, most applicants thought that the number was just right. So 5 gold and 10 silver, they thought, that's a pretty good distribution. It's a pretty good number. However, many applicants reported no meaningful difference between gold and silver, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Because from a program perspective, again, going to the dating service concept, if I'm not a gold, if you, what's your name? Yep. Janelle? Janelle. Okay, this is Janelle. Where do you go to school? PCOM. Oh, sweet. That's my school. If Janelle applied to Virginia Mason and gave me a silver, I know there are other applicants out there who designated me a gold. And so this unknown unconscious bias would be, Janelle just gave me a silver. So that's my own opinion of, I think the gold and silver has perks, but obviously has some downfalls within it. So I think there is a difference with gold and silver. The signals were well distributed across programs thanks to the silver tier, which means that there's a geographical distribution, and no-brainer interview rates follow a gold greater than silver, greater than no program signaled. So please signal. It doesn't cost anything to you. Now, can I put this idea in your mind when this rolled out? What if you were given 5 gold, 10 silver, then you can pay $100 more for a gold signal? Can you imagine if ERAS did that? Do you know how much ERAS made when this came out? Like $55 million, right? So a lot of the programs were, not just the students, but the programs were giving a lot of constructive feedback to the system. So you guys are just making money off of this. So obviously they decreased the fees. But as a former program leader, I thought, oh man, good thing they didn't do that. How inequitable would that be? Or would it be a better system to show programs that I really want to come here? Okay, so just a comparison between two application seasons, comparing a program like emergency medicine where you have 5 signals only versus anesthesia, 5 gold and 10 silver. There isn't much of a difference when you just look at the gold bucket and the small signal system bucket. So having the silver based on the statistics is a great idea for our specialty. A number of changes to the ERAS application. I'm not going to talk, there aren't many major changes. It's all a little nitpicky organization. You're not going to delete or add additional aspects of your application or your story. But one thing's interesting is changing the number of available home time entries from 5 to 3. So why do you think they would do that? Okay, so if I was born in Santa Barbara, I went to school out in Philadelphia, and I had a family in Michigan, and I was maybe my best friend's going to University of Miami, I could use that to say, those are my hometowns, and then preference the geographical signals. Okay, so there's always a way to modify your story for the benefit of application services. So ERAS caught on to that and said we're going to go from 5 hometowns to 3. There's just too much. Hobbies and interests. How many of you love this section? I love it. Yeah. What is your name? Jonathan, and where are you at? What year? Okay, so you probably submitted it already. Okay. Hobbies and interests. This is the most interesting aspect of the application from I'm sure, a student perspective. But I will share that this is a section that application team reviewer, they actually look at. Okay. Who has not heard of Reddit? All right. I feel very aged, but Reddit, I didn't know what it was until a couple of years ago. Reddit, it sounds like it's a blend between Twitter and studentdoctor.net, maybe. During my program director tenureship, I asked my team to look onto Reddit for me and troll. And so this is what do you call it? A blog from 2023. I removed the author. If it's one of you guys, I'm sorry. But quoting this author, hobbies, interests. Frequently overlooked section that has come up in almost every single interview I've had, more than any other section by far. Future ERS applicants, spend time on this to actually put some effort and thoughts expounding on hobbies. Example, just don't put cooking, right? Cooking, especially Italian cuisine, especially love making a risotto. Looking to learn making Italian desserts like tiramisu. So, sounds like a dating entry, right? Second bullet point, same author. My interviews literally never want to talk or even mention my volunteering or research. But the hobbies got brought up almost every interview. So for all medical students hyper-focused on how many hours should I put per week for this activity, it is okay if I only have one leadership. Is it okay if I only have one leadership position? Or do I have enough awards? And then they spend 5 minutes typing some generic, boring stuff for hobbies. Really interesting input, but I do hold value on this opinion that now you don't have to list 20 or 25 hobbies. I actually discourage it, and I think there's a character limit. And correct me if I'm wrong this year, but do actually spend time, because this is going to be a talking point and probably a nice segue to Dr. Burns' topic later on of the interview. Couple more minute changes here. Certifications, licensures, and so forth. Not a big deal, but just making sure that you guys are aware of changes that occur every application year. So please look at those changes. ERAS does a really nice job on their website. During the transition from my ERAS PD to chief, they had honed in on the number of experiences you can look at. And you guys probably know why they did that. The applications were getting too long. And from a program director standpoint, did you know that we can filter out applicants based on scores? So if all of you applied to anesthesia residency and you guys had taken USMLE and COMLEX scores, I can select out USMLE 250 and above, USMLE 240 to 50, 230 to 40, less than 210. You go click, 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 and then the software creates a resulted list of applicants, and then you go by one way. Did you guys know that we could do that? Okay. The experiences, you can't really create an algorithm to sift out. You can't use whatever you use, ChatGPT or something, where the AI says, hey, capture the words in the applicants that say triathlete, Howard Hughes research recipient. You can't really do that. And so how do you do that as a reviewer? You look at every application and you read. It's so painful because that's what you do. You sit down in your office 24/7, you just read through your applications. To make it better for the programs, or easier for the programs, or more efficient, they filter the experiences to a total of 10. That could include volunteer, research, medical missions, whatever you want to talk about, right? Did you get sick? Did you power through? Did you almost qualify for the Olympics? Were you a caretaker for a family member? Were you an immigrant? First generation, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you want to this opportunity is for you to make your story. What was your name again? John. How is Jonathan different than Janelle? Right? So this is that opportunity for you to do so. But to make it extra meaningful or create more work, essentially, is you pick your top 3 experiences of the 10. So programs are going to look at these top 3. So be mindful of what these top 3 options are. It's like I know I'm sure a number of people here have traveled. It's like saying, pick out their top 3 destinations and why they made them your top 3. All right, this is a recent, have you guys heard of ACRAC? All right, if there's anyone influential in all these changes with ERAS, signaling and so forth, is Dr. Walpow. He goes to the SAAPM, which is an annual meeting in Chicago for all the program leaders, regardless of residency or fellowship status. And so this anesthesiologist, he's over at Hopkins. He interviewed a student who matched into University of Michigan in categorical route, and just wanted to share some learnings. I forget, it's about half hour. I encourage you to find this podcast and listen to it. I don't get any proceeds by supporting this, but he does an incredible job by asking the right questions. All right. This student just so happened to be a, quote, social media ambassador, whatever that means. I think that person has a TikTok. You probably look her up right now. Trisha Pendergast is the name. Some tips that she gave away were: 1, find a clerkship if you can. Work towards finding a clerkship, which may take a lot of work just to find a clerkship. A lot of burden. Make the connections, ask for letters of rec. And for the personal statement or letter of intent, please do have a polished personal intent to programs when you're interested in a clerkship. It's not just some casual, I want to apply for a sub-I. They're looking at that. It feels like you're applying to residency. Step 2, I know it's a pass-fail for some, because I believe now you can still have the numeric result option, or is that going away? Can I have some fact checking in the audience? Okay, the scores are, the golden number that's being thrown around is 230. And I apologize, I think another slide I had step 2, I meant step 1. For step 2, having step 1 go from score to pass fail, step 2's numeric value has a tremendous amount of pressure. And I'm going to call that out. I'm sorry, but step 2 has all the weight is going on that score. So instead of filtering out a step 1 score, you're going to filter out a step 2 score. Okay. Hone in on minute 13 and 11 seconds. She really starts talking about osteopathic medical students, which is fantastic because there's insight into the variability of applicants. Mentorship was incredibly highlighted, and then she really does a nice job of talking about disparities of resources between allopathic and osteopathic medical students, but not in a discouraging way. The best chance of matching is an MS4 year. So if you're unsuccessful as an MS4, it is more challenging reapplying. Not impossible, as we've done so in our program. Don't give up, keep reapplying. The opportunity is there, but your percentage of success is just lower, and that's a given. Resources, resources, resources. Get strong letters of rec, engage in leadership opportunities. It doesn't stop at med school years, by the way. You're going to keep beefing up and ramping up your CV as a resident if you're interested in a job and if you're interested in a fellowship. So looking back into medical school is like an exercise for your future life. Residency, you're going to be working a lot more, and also you're going to continue beefing up your CV. And how do you have time to do that? You make time. The average step scores, this is USMLE, this is, again, quoting her and Dr. Walpow, 252 and then 249 for an unmatched score. So the delta is not very large, but the score is really high. Now that's the average. So you're going to have folks who, we've matched someone in the 220s at our program. So it's not impossible to match. If you feel like, oh, I didn't get the score that I wanted, don't give up. You can certainly retry, but keep going. Personal statement. This is my favorite topic of the program, of the application, because of ChatGPT. This is a survey that someone sent out to medicals through studentdoctor.net about a year and a half ago now. Will you use ChatGPT for any part of ERAS? So any part of ERAS, not necessarily personal statement. The numbers are actually pretty fascinating to me because large programs may not spend as much time looking at your application, what you've actually submitted as an experience or your personal statement. But Dr. Byrne may know, when you read through hundreds of letters of recommendation and hundreds of personal statements, I know which ones are submitted through some form of it, submitted through ChatGPT. If the program leadership reviewers get a hunch that they're through ChatGPT, it doesn't sit very well. So make it personal, keep it succinct, one page, and please keep it polished. Formatting. Do not copy and paste, because it's translated. There was one personal statement that had like a Arial font, and the next paragraph was personal Times New Roman. It just doesn't look good. It's not polished. It's clearly indicating the applicant did a copy paste. Okay, and an engaging opening paragraph, because that's where we start. That's where we read. We don't read the bottom of the personal statement and go back up. Engaging personal statement, opening paragraph. It's like, Mission Impossible opening scene. But please don't write about the day I parachuted across Turkey and hit a hot air balloon. That's too dramatic, okay? Because you may not have done that. Did you really do that, right? And so it's a little too dramatic, too Hollywood. Keep it personal, keep it real, keep it authentic. All right. I'm going to read this. You're going to say, is this ChatGPT or not? As a future physician, I hope to impact medicine by advancing knowledge and expertise in the field through research and innovation. One way I hope to do this is by contributing to the path of excellence in precision health, which focuses on developing personalized treatment plans for patients. By combining my passion for science and technology with my desire to improve patient care, I hope to help develop more effective and targeted therapies that help improve health outcomes and reduce healthcare costs. Is this ChatGPT or not? What? How many think ChatGPT? Ooh, how many not? That is ChatGPT. Next one. As a 22-year-old man from Oklahoma, my upbringing, background, experiences have all played a significant role in shaping who I am as a person and will continue to define the person I want to be in the future. Growing up in Oklahoma, I was raised in a small town with a tight-knit community. My parents instilled in me the values of hard work, dedication, and compassion, and from a young age, I was taught the importance of helping others and giving back to my community. This mindset has stayed with me throughout my life and is something that I strive to embody in everything I do. ChatGPT or not? Huh? How many think ChatGPT? Okay, and I'm assuming the rest unsure or not. This is ChatGPT. So, I don't know. It's up to you guys. It's your application. If you guys would use ChatGPT, future program leadership right there with the Starbucks cups. No, I'm just kidding. But if you're spending hours and hours on these letters of recommendation and personal statements, I mean, these are one-page letters and essays, you get tired of reading them. One thing that, if you guys are ever interested in program leadership later on your residency program, do me one favor. Don't forget about the individual, because this person who submitted their application spent hours on their application and potentially their personal statement if they didn't use ChatGPT. I think that would be more work. But if you're fatigued at reading letter number 20, or you've went through 20 applicants and you get tired, stop. Because number 21, you're going to forget something. You're going to oversee a really important point in their personal statement. So that's the thing that I encourage our team is just read 10 a day and stop. Because, or 10 at a time and stop. 10 a day you wouldn't finish. It would take you 6 months. Give applicant number 11 the time and the energy that they deserve in reading their application. Interviews, just a quick bullet point that I want to include before Dr. Byrne is you have to practice. Please practice on Zoom with the right lighting, your right Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera. And I know some students are stuck in a closet in a rotation or something, but please treat it like a formal interview. If you have the opportunity to be invited to an in-person interview for the first time, not a second look, I do encourage you to go. Going back to the dating service analogy, if you are interested in a future life partner, not that residency is the same, sometimes it is, how different would it be if they say, oh, I can do a Zoom, versus I'm going to move my schedule around, move my clerk shifts around, go fly out there and meet you in person. Big difference. Programs will say it doesn't matter. It does, I think, in my opinion. Again, this is just my opinion. Lights, camera, action. Please look at, if you're going to go the Zoom route, ask a friend, ask a family member, how do I look on Zoom? Is it too dark? Does it look too American Idol-esque, right? There's a difference. There absolutely is a difference. Presentation matters when you're doing a formal interview. Eye contact and gazing. Put a little sticker or something on your laptop or your iPhone, wherever you use your Zoom interview platform from. Please don't use an iPhone because you guys have FaceTimed your family. My parents, when they FaceTime me, I get motion sickness because they're moving their hands, right? They have tremors and whatnot. If you have a computer or a desktop, make sure you have a little sticker on your computer so it looks like you're making eye contact. It does get distracting for program interviewers when you're doing this, or it looks like you're looking at a notepad, which is fine. But if I ask Janelle, sorry to put you on the spot, you're right in front of me. If I say, hey, Janelle, name an experience you had in your life where you had a really challenging relationship and how you did to deal with that. And if it looks like you're looking at a piece of paper like, oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Oh, back in high school, it looks like you're rehearsing. It's not natural. So please avoid that. So practice. Wi-Fi does count. You have spent hours submitting application. You get 20 minutes, maybe 10, 15 with a faculty. Please prepare, because that's your one shot. That's your one exposure with that faculty member. So if it's glitchy, so forth, just practice and know that your Wi-Fi is dependable. It obviously goes both ways. So if your program interviewer is replying to pages and texting and emailing their administrator, that's really disrespectful to an applicant. It really is. So if the ball's in your court, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. And then identity theft is not a joke, Jim. That's from the show The Office. Be true to yourself. Try not to become someone you think you are. And then in wrapping up, just be authentic, please. Be who you are. I can't emphasize that enough. It sounds very elementary and basic, but we do pick up on someone's trying really hard to be liked or really hard to get in on that Zoom interview. The journey actually begins really early. So for the residents that are in the room, you're thinking about fellowship, you're thinking about jobs. You've already learned the tools, you've already had those tools in your box. Apply those to the years to come. I really believe the joy is in the journey. As painful as this seems for some, I don't want to assume that it's painful, but take this as a learning opportunity for later on when you apply for a job. Because that's, I think, a much more challenging, more complex process. And just take the learnings you've acquired over the years in this process. And please don't forget your pleases and thank yous. If it's an email or a card, do thank your program for the interview opportunity. When you go into internship, please get to know the names of folks you work with. Say please and thank you. When you get a job, when you work with faculty, when you engage with nursing staff, I think we need that more than ever. And it starts with being a medical student, because it's really hard to train or educate my faculty that are near retirement that, hey, you forgot to say thank you, you forgot to say please. I can't, they're really hard to change. So please start now. And it's really about the journey and the connections you make. I cannot emphasize that enough. The world is incredibly small. So be kind, pleases and thank yous. It's so easy. All right. Well, thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me? I'm going to save the next 10 minutes for questions directed at me. For anyone here, it's
a lot of them are saying that they only interview gold signaled applicants who gold signal them just because they have so many applicants. But we know that we need to apply to more than 5 programs. How do we enhance our silver signals and show that we are still interested in those programs?
Great question. So do you guys understand her question? All right. You can absolutely, for your application year, I encourage you to be advocates for osteopathic medical schools and the experience. Believe it or not, this was a hot topic about my MS3 year back at PCOM. There's a lot of discussion from an administrator saying, why are so many medical schools opening? If you have a lot of schools, where are they supposed to rotate? Right? Where are they supposed to do clerkships? Clerkships are really hard to find for a medical school. It's like deja vu. We talked about just that. Now, to amplify your silver signals, what do you think you could do to amplify your visibility, your interest in those you're signaling silver? What do you think you can do? Exactly. Yeah. So you guys are thinking like professionals, right? If you reach out to the programs coordinator or program director, I wouldn't go to the program director at first, coordinator, and just share your story. I'm really interested in this program. I designated silver signal. This is why I'm really interested in your program. However, don't make it a whole page. Most people read emails on your iPhone, on their smartphone. So if they have to scroll like this, they're probably not going to read it. So keep it to maybe 1 paragraph, 2 paragraphs, succinct, to the point. What else? Yes. What's your name?
I'm an associate program director at the University of Cincinnati, and it's good to see all of you guys. I just wanted to add to your answer, if you don't mind, about amplifying your silvers. I would say that with programs that are saying we're only considering our golds, maybe you start looking at different programs that aren't as competitive in the region that you want to, because the gold signal, like if you send all 5 of your gold signals to like Duke, Hopkins, UCSF, all the big fancy programs, they get 1,000 gold signals probably. And then you've just used all of your most highly targeted gold signals on just those 5 programs, and maybe you get 1 of those interviews, and that's not good news. So I would say you have to mix it up depending on the level of competitiveness of your application. If you're a very highly 275, tons of publications applicant, then maybe you can spend your golds on those sorts of places. But if you're a more average applicant, like I was, then maybe you diversify the places that you're going. So that's what I would encourage.
Thank you. That's great advice. So be very mindful of where you're actually putting the golds, because you'll almost be guaranteed an interview unless you have some red flags, like you failed an exam or your application's incomplete or you only have 2 letters of rec. I mean, those are no-brainers. Those are absolute musts. So contact your program if you have a silver, engage in some way. Like I said, the world is small at the same time. So if you know someone, I think conferences like this are imperative to things like that. I hate to call it name dropping, but we had a student here, not here, where were we last year? In Florida, who applied to our program and said that they had met me. The program director walked by me in the hallway and said, "Hey, do you remember this person?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I do. I met him at a conference. He seems really interested, engaged, professional, really interested in moving out there. I have connections to Spokane, which is in Eastern Washington." He got an interview. Now, I don't know his paper application, but of course, the program director at the time probably was on the fence between that person and someone else. And that was just enough to click invite on that one versus decline interview on the other one that he was deciding between. You had a question? Did I see a hand up? No? Okay. I would say I would go for the gold. It sounds funny, but I would go for the gold over the geographical signal. Yeah. Melissa?
Is that you can make the last couple lines of your personal statement tailored to that program and say, I've signaled, you don't even have to say you signaled them gold, but these are my reasons for being at your program. I went to your open house and I was really fascinated by X, Y, or Z, something that's very specific to that program. And I would really feel that I would be a strong candidate for your program and succeed well.
I would also say in that last paragraph, a lot of times we as program director, at least I will, when I'm reviewing 1,000 of these, I will glance at that last paragraph to see what they've said about their connections to our program almost first before I read that first paragraph of your personal statement. I think that it's important to be specific there. If you just say, I have family in town, that's not really something that people are going to look at. But if you say, look, I'm a big Bengals fan and blah, 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 then I'm going to be looking at somebody applying to Cincinnati a little bit more strongly, depending on the specificity of the connection. Also, program directors are really good at sniffing out ChatGPT nonsense like she was mentioning earlier. If somebody says, I'm interested in your program because of your dedication to research and integrity and blah, 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 like, that's not going to really fly. Like, okay, you just clearly copied that into all of your last paragraphs. But I would spend the time and be specific, especially for your gold signals. And even if you're silver, I would say spend the extra time, make it specific to the city that you're applying, and make sure you double check that you're copying and pasting into the right one.
You know, I'm just reflecting on it. It may seem like a lot that you're working on for your application, and you're stressing about, does this look good? Does this look polished? Can you read my personal statement? I actually had 3 friends not in medicine read my personal statement back in the day, and they gave me some really good feedback. You know, they're English majors. One was political science. One was not sure what she wanted to do in her life, but they gave me incredible feedback. So lean on those resources. Doesn't mean you have to, you know, have a program director read your letter for a rehearsal period. What else? Any final questions? You know, we're here to help you. We're here to help you succeed. We're here to help you answer any questions, navigate through the process, get feedback if you didn't match, or feedback of a poor clerkship, but you really wanted to go there. How to prepare for a clerkship is up next. And please use this conference as that resource, because there's no better format than in person to get the feedback and the face value. I can't tell you more than ever before how human connection is vital, not only to healthcare, but to your success. Okay. All right. Well, oh, Austin. Go ahead, Austin. No, you're good. Yeah.
I think this kind of started trickling in last year, and I think it's more important this year with the central application.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any programs here are utilizing that this year, but I guess what's the utility of having the central application this year in combination with ERAS at the same time?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know which programs are submitting to the central application. I know our program is not going to the central application. There's a lot of tradition and history with ERAS, so I think a lot of folks, there's so much change going on that they're just going to probably hang around on the ERAS format because that's what's comfortable, that's what's known to them. Programs that want to experiment and advance, I would say, would have the most resources. So major university programs may tease with the idea of a central application process. Melissa, do you have any comments about that? Dr. Burns at a major university, so.
Not using the central application that I'm aware of.
And that's University of Michigan, so. Please find one of us with our names are here, so please don't be shy and ask questions. Thank you for listening to my little spiel to kick off this session and actually the conference today. Next up, we'll be joined by Drs. Matthias Franzen, Ms. Samantha Bunk, and Ms. Elizabeth Gray. Dr. Franzen received his medical degree from Des Moines University College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2015. His residency training took place at the Ohio Health Doctors Hospital Anesthesia Program thereafter, and he is board certified in both the AOBA and the ABA. After graduation from training, he began working for the West Broad Anesthesia Corporation, serving the Ohio Health Doctors Hospital Anesthesia Department, where he currently serves as chief of the department. He quickly became involved with the anesthesia residency at Ohio Health Doctors Hospital after starting employment. First as simulation coordinator for the program, then associate program director, and now program director. In addition, he is the director of osteopathic education for the anesthesia program and helped it achieve continued recognition through innovative osteopathic curriculum design. Next, Ms. Samantha Bunk is a fourth-year medical student at Kansas City University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Kansas City, Missouri. Before entering medical school, she graduated cum laude from Oakland University in Auburn Hills, Michigan, where she received honors from the School of Health Sciences for completion of her degree in clinical diagnostic sciences. Student Dr. Bunk has been an active member of the AOCA since her first year of medical school and has served on the Future of the Field Committee through the last academic year. As an aspiring anesthesiologist, her professional interests include perioperative care, medical education, and physician wellness. Ms. Elizabeth Gray is a PGY2 resident at Doctors Hospital, and they together will be speaking on how to apply to elective rotations and be successful. Please join me in applause in welcoming Dr. Franzen, Ms. Bunk, and Ms. Gray.
All right, my name is Samantha. I am a fourth-year medical student at Kansas City University, and today we're going to be talking about elective rotations. My specific portion of the presentation is going to focus more for the third years on how to successfully apply to rotations. We don't have any conflicts of interest, and we don't have any financial disclosures. These are our objectives. Again, we're going to go over how to schedule rotations and how to be successful while you're there. All right, so an audition rotation is generally a rotation that you do in the specialty you're interested in during your fourth year of medical school. It is usually either 2 or 4 weeks long, and it's at a residency program, usually residency programs that you're interested in applying to. It's a good way to learn about the program and let the program learn about you as an applicant. It's a great way to be able to differentiate yourself from other applicants in the pool. It's also a great way to practice skills In anesthesia, we might not always have a rotation opportunity during our 3rd year, so it's a great way to practice skills that you're hopefully going to be using for the next 4 years in residency. It's also a great way to network with residents and program faculty, again, so that they know you and they can differentiate you from that pool of thousands of applicants that are going to be applying. And like I said, it's a great way to impress programs if you go and you do the work. So when you're considering programs to apply to, you need to start doing research early. A lot of programs open up in the beginning of the calendar year, so in January or February. So during your 3rd year of medical school in the fall, if you're interested in anesthesia, it's important to start looking at programs and looking at when their applications open. It's also important to consider where you're going to be living during your 4th year and if you are going to need to obtain housing and to budget ahead for that. It's also important to look at the cost of applying to programs, which we'll talk about further. But again, a lot of this is about being proactive, picking programs and budgeting so that you can be ready and prepared to front that cost. It's also important to look at yourself as an applicant and look at the competitiveness of the program. So doing research ahead of time, especially on if they've graduated DO residents in the past, that helps you kind of narrow down where you want to apply so that you can have the best opportunity to make it worth your while to go there. So the Visiting Student Learning Opportunities website is one of the main places where you can apply for these rotations. In the last application cycle, a lot of the M4s can attest to this, it's $15 per rotation that you apply to. So that can add up pretty quickly if you're trying to do a lot of rotations, because you're generally going to have to apply to more rotations than you're going to expect to get. So if you want to do 5 rotations, I think that I applied to about 25 different programs. Clinician Nexus is also an opportunity to apply for rotations. There's no cost associated with that. You just have to do research into the program and figure out how you need to go about applying. I have had really great success doing research and looking at the program website or reaching out to program coordinators to see how I can apply to their program. Again, sending information, showing that you've done a little bit of research and why you're interested in their program, and asking to confirm that VSLO or Clinician Nexus is the correct way to apply, and confirming the date. I've had multiple programs that already had an affiliation agreement with my school, and I was able to bypass VSLO and just send my application through their website. So that saves money and also gives you a better chance of being able to get a rotation. And like I said, a lot of these programs open in the beginning of the calendar year and then subsequently continue opening through April. So it's just important to know what the timeline is for each program. And like I said, preparation is the most important part of being successful when you're applying for these rotations. So preparing as many documents as possible ahead of time. So for example, on VSLO, a lot of programs are going to want a standard AAMC immunization form. So if you can get that filled out, have it approved by your school or your primary care physician, and have that ready to go so that you can apply on the first day that the application opens. Reaching out to program coordinators, like I said, is very helpful. Working on affiliation agreements with your school ahead of time if you know that there's a program you're interested in going to. And then also budgeting for tuition fees. So on top of application fees, some of these programs are also going to require you to pay tuition once you are accepted and you accept the offer. So that's another thing to consider, because you don't want to put all this time into applying and then not be comfortable paying the fee or not have it in your budget. It's also important to determine the amount of rotations you want to do and where you want to do them so that you can accurately hit the right target areas and apply to the right number of programs. And networking is super, super important. Like Dr. Bean said, it is a very small community, and using your network to help you get rotations is super helpful. I actually got half of my rotations this year just from reaching out to my mentor and having her reach out on my behalf to program coordinators or program directors that she was good friends with. Like I said, applying in the beginning of the application cycle is the best way to get a rotation. Many of these programs are first come, first serve. Make sure that you're applying to multiple dates. You can always go into VSLO if you're accepted for a specific date and take that date off for other rotations. That just gives you the best opportunity to have a chance to rotate at the program you're interested in. Also, a great idea is to consider applying to subspecialties instead of just general anesthesia. So you can rotate within pain medicine or pediatric anesthesia at an institution that you're interested in, and that will still help you get a chance to see the program, interact with residents and faculty, and it may give you an opportunity that you might not have had if their general anesthesia rotations were full. And also, if you are planning to dual apply, it is a great idea to also at least do 1 or 2 rotations in the specialty that you're going to be dual applying in. And then after you've been accepted, you're going to pay that tuition fee, and you need to complete post-decision requirements as well as onboarding. Those are things that need to be done in a timely manner because program coordinators are going to be looking at that. If they have to keep reminding you, are you going to be a resident that they're going to have to keep reminding? So keeping it professional, finishing everything on time, communicating if you have questions or if there's going to be a delay in filling out the information. Finding housing, Airbnb is popular, but it is a lot cheaper. There's some other options, such as rotating room, for example, which is made by healthcare professionals. So a lot of medical students will rent out their apartment, or residents will rent out a room in their house for significantly cheaper than what Airbnb would cost you. So that's just like another great way to save some money since we're all on a budget. And then if for some reason you are no longer able to attend a rotation, make sure you're communicating your schedule conflict and you are being professional about that and letting them know in a timely manner so that it doesn't mess up their schedule and they can offer the opportunity to another student.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Gray, and as Sam said, I'm a CA1 at Doctor's Hospital with Dr. Franzen. So I wanted to add this slide in, especially for any MS3s that don't know what an audition rotation is, they don't know how it works, they don't know timing, or any MS4s that haven't done one yet. So typically, most programs, your audition rotation is anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and typically you're going to start anywhere 5 to 6 a.m. and go anywhere to 3 to 4 p.m. You're typically assigned to a resident, maybe 1 or 2 during the day, or usually at our program, you're with the same resident for a week, and then you switch off with another resident the next week. You could some days be with another attending or one of the mid-levels, kind of anywhere of that model. So with that being said, especially from the resident perspective that I'm giving, we as residents, we do spend a lot of time with the students. Yes, you know, Dr. Franzen's really good in our institution about talking to students, getting to know them, but I do think from the resident perspective, we get to know you guys better than probably anybody else at that program that you're rotating at. So when making this presentation, I polled all the residents at my institution as well as former chiefs that had graduated last year to see what are the big things that they look for, what are some green flags, and what are some red flags when students come and rotate with us. So starting with the green flags, a good attitude is always important, right? Being on time to your rotations, asking questions, being involved with the specialty. I can speak from a resident, and I'm sure the program directors here can also speak. We know when this is not your number one specialty. You don't see that a lot in anesthesia since it's getting so competitive, but you can tell when a student, this is not their number one. You can tell when this is like maybe a filler rotation for them. You can tell. So be engaged, like ask questions. As a resident, I don't expect any of my med students to know anything, like at all, but ask questions, be present, right? Be respectful to our program coordinator. Yes, our director, you know, Dr. Franzen's very important, but also like our resident coordinator. We're really good friends with her. We're very close. It is a very big issue when our students are rude or disrespectful to her, okay? Also, there's other students that are in the OR, right? There's other students that are on surgery, on ortho, on OB, ENT, right? Be respectful to them, be kind to the nurses. One of the great things about anesthesia is we get to work with everybody in the hospital, but that can also be one of the bad things, right? So programs talk, be kind, be respectful, get along well with other ones, right? One of the other things that one of my chiefs mentioned last year was how do auditioners treat our new interns, right? Do they interact with our new interns? Because a lot of times our interns aren't on service with us. Do they talk to them? Are they engaging? Are they asking questions, right? One day, if that student matches with us, that intern's going to be their CA1. They're going to be teaching them a lot. So it is important that how they treat not only the senior residents on service, but maybe even some of the new ones, the interns, right? And then there's the infamous, like, I think 3 a.m. test, right? Can we teach you at 3 a.m.? Can we get along with you at 3 a.m.? And I think that's the nice way of saying, don't be, like, be yourself, but don't be weird. In, in a nice way of saying it, right? It's that social awareness, right? And that's such a big thing on audition rotations. And I laugh about it, and we all kind of joke about it, and I see some giggles in the audience. But it is a thing, right? Again, be present, be nice, have a little bit of social awareness, especially where you're at, okay? And then obviously being willing to help whatever capacity, whether that's pushing a bed, that's getting a lead, that's helping set up the room early in the mornings. You know, a lot of times we have didactics super early, like 5:45. So I'm 5 a.m. setting up a room. Is the student willing to help me? Are they even to grab oxygen or oxygen tank or whatever is super helpful, okay? So red flags. I talked about this earlier, not being engaged. We can tell when this is not your primary place that you want to go, or this is not the specialty that you want to do, right? Trying to go home early. I have had students that have like, hey, can I like go at 1? I have this and this or whatever. And I try to be understanding, but again, this is an audition, especially at my program. It's only 2 weeks. It's a time for us to get to know you and you to get to know us. So just be cautious of that, right? Lack of social awareness. A big thing that I had 2 or 3 residents actually tell me that was interesting was a student talking loudly in the OR and talking loudly during timeout, right? Or sign out. That's a really big thing, especially with the surgeons, with the nurses. You can really get in trouble with that. So just be cautious. Watch what's going on in the OR. When it's time for that, remember, be quiet. Like the nurse has got to give, the surgeon does, and anesthesia as well. And then I also had 1 or 2 residents that mentioned failed clinical rotations. So in my program, I think a lot of osteopathic as well, the residents are really involved in the interview process, and we give our feedback to the program directors and students that we like and maybe students that we didn't like. So when we go through the interview process, and even with auditioners, sometimes it could come up students that have failed a clinical rotation for whatever reason. And when I asked specific residents, like, hey, why did you mention this? The response they gave me was, if they failed a rotation, I want to know why. Was it they failed, a COMAT or whatever, or was it an attitude problem? Because if it's an attitude problem and they have that as an MS3, they're going to have an attitude problem when they're a resident. And it's really hard to fix an attitude problem if they come in as an intern or a CA1, and that's just a difficult resident that we may have that we don't want to have to deal with. I know an unorganized application is a big thing too. I think probably other speakers are going to talk about that as well, but make sure it's organized, not having any misspelling or anything like that. And then a lot of osteopathic programs, ours as well. It's a small world, right? With Ohio Health, we have OUHCOM that rotates with us. So we see some of these students on surgery, on IM, on OB, and you would not be surprised how many times we've had a 4th-year student that, we really liked, they were great with us, but we have an IM resident that says, hey, they were horrible on our rotation. They were rude, they didn't want to work, or they were disrespectful to some of the OB attendings or the OB residents, and that's a really concerning thing because, again, as anesthesia, we work with everyone, which is great, but we also want to have residents that can work with everyone. And as a student, if you are having issues working with other specialties, you could have that issue when you're a resident. So key takeaways, if you don't remember anything else from what I'm saying, be yourself, share your interest, be engaging. I love to talk about residents where they're from. As you can tell, I'm not from the Midwest the way I talk. So I always like to hear what people are from, what they're interested in, what their football team is. So don't be afraid to share all that kind of stuff with us. Be kind to the other students in the OR, on the floor, on your other rotations. I promise that stuff matters. Program directors talk, especially at small places like us. The IM program coordinator, the anesthesia, and the surgery, they may have all been residents together. So they will talk about a student in a good and a bad way. Majority of us, just speaking from the resident perspective, I don't really care about your GPA or your board score. maybe I shouldn't say that with my program director here, but I don't. A lot of mine is, can I teach you? Can I get along with you at 3 a.m.? Are you going to fit in with the culture of our program? We're a very tight-knit community, which is great with us. But if you do have a resident that, for whatever reason, has a bad attitude or can't work with someone, that can be very challenging for all of us, okay? And again, can we teach you? Can you kind of pass that 3 a.m. test, okay? I'll be around. Again, my name is Elizabeth. If you have any other questions for the students, please come and find me.
All right, thank you, Sam, Liz, thank you, Dr. Bean, for the wonderful introduction, making me sound way more important than I really am, so I appreciate all that. I'm Dr. Franzen. I'm at the Ohio Health Doctors Hospital Anesthesia Program. I'm the program director. I've been in that role for probably about 3 years now, and I'm actually happy to kind of hear that a lot of the same things that I will be talking about from a more of a program director and administrative perspective is things that we're looking for as how you can perform well on an audition rotation are actually similar to what the residents are looking for too. So maybe some of the things I'm getting across to them are actually speaking true finally. Dr. Bean presented an ACRAC podcast that she talked about, and it's really hard to find information in the literature and peer-reviewed studies or anything about how to perform well on auditions. There really isn't anything. But one thing you can find are a lot of program directors talking on podcasts about what they look for in applicants and what they find to be successful. And that very same ACRAC podcast is actually what I'm kind of talking about on this slide here. So I also encourage you to listen to it. I actually had during one of our didactic sessions, had our residents listen to it, because I think it's very important for them to know what it's like to be a student now going through this process, and how important it is now to be on the other side of that process as we're evaluating not only students on auditions, but also through the application process. So I get sometimes asked a lot, should I do an away rotation? Short answer is yes, with the big assumption that you're going to put your best foot forward. Obviously, you wouldn't probably be doing an audition rotation if you're not planning on doing your best. I would say probably don't do it, because it can be it'd be a huge gamble to possibly worsen what your application looks like in general. But for the most part, it's a wonderful on-site job interview. And I always tell applicants during the interview process, but also during auditions, that it's important for us to get to know you as an applicant, but it's probably even more important for you to get to know the program as well. And doing a audition rotation, you get to see everything. You get to see how the residents interact with their attendings. You get to see what their day-to-day lifestyle is like, what the ORs are like, how people are treated. So that is almost just as invaluable to you as an applicant, so that when you make that rank list finally, when it comes time to input all that into ERAS, you can make the best decision possible as to where you were hopefully going to go and spend your 4 years of anesthesia training. So in that same podcast, they did talk about kind of MD and DO students and how they kind of navigate the audition process. And it was mentioned that MDs do it more out of strategy, and that is true. They are trying to acquire as many rotations as possible, get as many opportunities to acquire letters of recommendation and interview spots. DOs are doing the exact same thing. There are just, unfortunately, you don't have a lot of residency programs attached to maybe the medical school that you're going to, or maybe it's really hard to get a clinical clerkship rotation during your third year to see if you even like anesthesia. So it's really important to get those rotations, even more so for DO applicants, and just so you can get your letters of rec, make sure you actually like the rotation from a clinical standpoint, and that's the specialty that you want to get involved in. I put this stat on there, although it's not statistically significant. It was mentioned on this podcast, and because it's the majority of people that matched into it, I do think it is important to at least kind of put it out there that 63% of applicants, I believe in the 2022 ERAS match, actually did an away rotation. So again, not statistically significant, but it was the majority of individuals that did that as well. This is also a time for you to kind of tell your story. Like I said, it's an on-site interview, and I'll kind of get into kind of discussing red flags here in a slide later, but this is a chance for you to kind of dictate the narrative of your application too, to kind of see what programs are looking for in terms of signaling, in terms of what their didactic schedules are like, so you can really kind of get a really nice view of what a program is currently as a student, and also what it'll be like if you were to rotate, or were you to match there as an applicant or as a resident. So how to succeed on rotation. This was actually another ACRAC podcast. I think it was one of the ones, maybe a couple years ago, that they had discussed. And so I just kind of pulled out some things from there that I thought were fairly important. I'm not going to discuss all these. You guys can read them. They're in your If you go on your app, you can download the slides. But I'm going to pick out the ones that I think are maybe more important to me personally, or that might be kind of unique that you hadn't really thought about before. So how to interact. So interacting before the start of the day. What they're really getting at is before you even start your rotation, and that is actually really important because you have an opportunity to reach out to your program director, the coordinator, maybe the residents to see how can I kind of get a head start and really hit the ground running on my rotation when I start. And so that shows effort. It shows you reaching out. It shows you wanting to be a little more proactive. And trust me, those things matter. Our coordinator is involved in our interview process. I have her rank every single individual that interviews with us. And what she's looking at, she's not really sitting in on the interviews, but she's looking at how did you interact with her during your audition rotations? How did you interact when it came time to set up for interviews? So kind of maybe when you don't think the eyes are on you, trust me, the eyes are on you. You want to really be interacting in a professional manner with everybody that you have an opportunity to meet while you're on rotation. Introduce yourself, do it often, do it frequently. You know, these are short rotations, 2 to 4 weeks. Ours is a 2-week rotation, so it's pretty short. You want to make sure you're introducing yourself to everybody new that you see, because that might be the individual that you interview with, or that is sitting on our recruitment team looking at applicants to offer up interviews. So you want your name to be one that, hey, I remember that individual. I really liked them. I had a connection with them. Let's offer them an interview. Educational topics, bring them. You know, it's important to kind of show that you're interested and that you have things that you want to talk about. Obviously, arrive early, stay late, work hard, get to know your patients, be helpful. Consider yourself an extension of the department. It might be something that kind of gets lost, but is absolutely true. You are a representation of the anesthesia department, even though you're technically not employed by the hospital or actually a part of the residency program at that time. But people are going to know that, oh, you're interacting with the anesthesia team, you're wearing the same color scrubs, you're at the head of the table. They're going to know you're with the anesthesia department. And so when I talk or have a lot of the perioperative staff come and chat with me, they'll say, hey, that new intern of yours was really helpful. And I'll talk to them like, oh no, that was actually one of our medical students. And they'll say, well, they just, without even any prompting, they help move the patient over to the OR table, they help put the SCDs on, they grab the arm boards. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. I was just able to focus on the patient and really get them ready and kind of help them keep them calm as they're getting ready to be induced with anesthesia. Trust me, all those little things, they do get back to us from a program level standpoint. It can be very important in helping you acquire an interview and hopefully ultimately matching into a program. The last one on there, no throwaway rotations. You think this would be obvious. Dr. Gray kind of mentioned about it a little bit as well, but there are people that you can definitely tell maybe they're your backup, or they have other rotations that either you're backup from a specialty standpoint or backup from a program standpoint. It does come across pretty glaring, and I can just say from experience and knowing more from the application process, I've had applicants that have scored in the 600s or 700s on their COMLEX, fantastic scores, that have definitely come across very condescending know-it-alls on rotations, and I have ranked people that have scored in the 400s ahead of them, because that is not an individual that I want on service. So that person did an on-site rotation, took that gamble, did not put their best foot forward, and it really hurt them on our rank list. So it is very important on how you interact and how you discuss and how you talk with your colleagues, because it's going to be a reflection of how you are as a resident as well. This was also another podcast. I believe this one was also on ACRAC. This was actually, it was titled How to Be a Star, and in the references for this, you'll be able to kind of go back and look at all these podcasts too, and I do encourage that if you have the time to do so. This was how to be a star as a resident. So these are kind of the green flags. Now, I know we're talking about audition rotation, so I tried to pull the things out of there that I think can apply to students as well. Some of these are very obvious. Again, I'm not going to go over all of them, but some of them that I will kind of highlight: expressing concerns without complaining. Most students don't complain about anything, which is great. Nobody likes complainers, but I will say constructive feedback and constructive criticism, which I talk about a lot, I highly value, because it shows that you're able to provide me with actually important feedback. I get it all the time, for me, when I talk to students, it's always it's not the glass is half full or half empty, it's always full. This is the best program ever. I want to come here, and it's like there's nothing ever wrong. There are definitely things that are wrong at programs. There are things that we can work on and fix, but if you're able to come and actually talk to us about those concerns that you have and do it in a professional manner, you are able to bring up possibly even solutions. That shows a really strong level of emotional, social intelligence, and it's very strong professionally to be able to do things in that manner. So that's really something that I appreciate and provides feedback for the program. On an individual standpoint, though, being receptive to feedback, that's what they kind of mentioned in the podcast. I, again, talk about more of constructive criticism. That is the most important thing for me. So I know every program director has their thing that they like as far as attributes, and attendings have different things that they like as well. But I want someone who can take constructive criticism, constructive feedback, and turn that into a positive and not a negative. And in anesthesia, you're going to, and that's from a medical student standpoint, maybe you were taught how to intubate by an attending, maybe it was the day before, and you felt like you were really successful. Now you're on to the next day and you have another attending that's watching you intubate and they're saying, hey, what are you doing? This is not correct. Don't take that personally. Take that as an opportunity to learn, to kind of take a step back and think, why is this attending today teaching it to me this way? Why did the attending yesterday teach it to me in that way? What are the pros? What are the cons? And because maybe in the future, you might like the way the attending yesterday taught you, but so at some point, sometime, it might not work, and you're going to need to rely upon other techniques and methods. And so, ideally, being open, being coachable, being adaptable, that to me is the most important thing, because unfortunately, we're all high achievers. We wouldn't be in medicine if we weren't high achievers in life. We're used to being right. That's how we got into medical school, by performing well in exams. But then you get into med school and residency and you realize, oh, I don't know hardly anything. You're just kind of spinning your wheels a lot. The way a lot of us learn best is from mistakes that we make and trying to improve upon them. So we know as a program leads, as educators, that you're going to make mistakes. That is normal. What I want to know is, how do you respond to that? Do you internalize it? Do you make excuses for it? Or do you say, you know what, I can learn from that and I can be better the next time. I might not be perfect. I might not do it correctly 100% the next time, but I will improve upon that. Having emotional and social tone, we talked about that. Professionalism, reliability, positive attitude. I think all these things are pretty self-explanatory. That same podcast also went into red flags. Most of these are just the exact opposite of the other things on the slide, so I'm not going to touch on really hardly any of them except for the very last one, and that is those people that don't own it. To me, with that reference, and how I can reflect more for a medical student, is if you have something, well, first off, if you're on service and you make a mistake, obviously you want to, fess up to it as soon as you can, because that can impact patient care. And those are the things that I really value as a program director, because I don't want somebody hiding something from me if they do something to or make a mistake with a patient and they call me into the room, they can't realize why the patient's not waking up, and they're leaving out a very vital, important piece of information that would have helped me with that patient. And here we are reversing everything and trying to wake this patient up when they realize, like, oh, they gave an abnormal amount of insulin and now the patient's not waking up because of that. Those are things that are important to kind of know. So I don't want things to be hid. We can talk about why an error was made and how to correct that in the future, but it's kind of what they say, the cover-up is worse than the crime. That is absolutely true. When it comes to your applications, obviously you might have some things on there that you think are red flags or weaknesses. When you're on a rotation, that is the time to address them and talk about them, because you can create a narrative around it. You can say, yes, I failed this clinical rotation. Maybe you were really sick. Maybe you had really some family emergencies that came up where you missed a lot of time. Sometimes those things don't actually get labeled, or kind of sometimes can be hard to find in the actual application. So if you're able to kind of talk about it, create a narrative around it, that's really important, and allows us to say, oh, this was actually a legitimate reason for you to maybe have struggled on this rotation, or to have maybe had a poor board score because you're going through a lot during that time. You can at least try to, maybe minimize the reflection of what that red flag might look like during your rotation, but also to help you acquire an interview later on. This was from a podcast from the ASA. It's called RUM, I think, Residents in the Room. But every now and then they'll actually have program directors come off and on. They call it the PD takeover. So this was actually, I think, 4 or 5 program directors all kind of talking about what they look for in potential trainees. Again, I think a lot of these have been mentioned before. I'm not going to go over a lot of them, but I have separated them out, and I put the ones on top in bold and the ones in bottom not in bold. And I kind of took them out, and the ones in bold are things that you can actually do when you're on an audition rotation. And a lot more of those things are mentioned than the things on the bottom. Things on the bottom are pretty much probably set in stone by the time you get to your clinical rotation. But a lot of the things that get mentioned in these podcasts are things that have to do with how you are from a personality standpoint, what kind of talking about your character, what kind of cultural fit you'll be with the program, how hard you work, things that we all kind of know from a positive, kind of have a positive attitude standpoint, but they're things that you can actually influence and change, and from one week to another you can alter. So these are the ones that I'd really think you should focus in on, because these are the things that you can actually provide a really positive reflection while you're on service with your attendings, residents, and possibly coordinators that you're going to be interacting with. So just some general pearls, kind of my takeaway slide as well. Some things that if you don't remember anything else, these are kind of the bigger things. Again, there are no throwaway rotations. Dr. Gray mentioned it, but probably someone even previous before she had mentioned, but she actually told the exact same scenario. We have had applicants that have done awesome on service, that we have said we're going to rank them in our top 5 at the very least. And then we hear about how they performed in IM, and specific people said they were lazy, condescending. They said, well, I'm doing anesthesia, I'm not doing IM, so they didn't put in the effort. That pretty much dropped that person to a level on a rank list that would probably make them not match. So those things matter. How you perform on service, on other services matter. Even on rotations that might be at other institutions matter, because it's a small program director community. We do talk, we do kind of reach out and kind of see how individuals are rotating and performing on other services. And when I say performing, it's not your knowledge base, it's not your clinical skill set, it's how you are as a person, your empathy, your kindness, your emotional and social intelligence on those rotations. Those are the things that we are really looking for, because I don't expect you to know a lot as a student coming in, and because everybody has various levels of background in anesthesia, and quite frankly, most of you don't get a lot of training during your first, second, and third years of medical school in anesthesia, because it's not something they really put into their curriculum. So this might be your very first rotation in anesthesia. You're going to perform a lot differently than if it's your fourth. So we get that. We don't hold that against anybody. We're just there to see if you are teachable, coachable, and you can receive constructive feedback in a positive manner. And so obviously that stuff applies to your clinical skill set as well. I pulled some quotes from those podcasts as well that I just thought that were really important. I think if you keep these things in the back of your mind, in your back pocket, I think you're going to perform well on auditions. Be a hardworking person that people want to hang out with. That sometimes is all it takes. That's what we're looking for someone that we want to spend the next 4 years with. Use professionalism and kindness as your North Star. The last one is one that it's actually more from me. I actually don't probably say this a lot to my residents. I probably should more than anything. I say it more to my kids. They're 1 and 3, so I don't really know if it's processing too much. But just remember, you are never too important or never too high up on any theoretical totem pole to be kind to everyone that you interact with. It doesn't matter, what job they're performing, what they're doing, and this really goes even to any sort of clinical work with a patient. You're never too good to help move a patient over, to help get stuff set up for a patient, to help change a wound dressing if it needs be. We can all take part in those sort of things, and if we see students doing that as well, that is a really profound level of emotional and social intelligence that we can see. So that is all I have for my presentation. These are my references. So again, a lot of them are, essentially all of them are podcasts. I do encourage you to go listen to them. And with that, we'll wrap up our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Drs. Franzen, Gray, and Ms. Bunk. Real quick comment before I introduce Dr. Byrne. If you edited that title to say how to apply for a job and be successful, or how to apply for an anesthesiology job and be successful, there's a lot of parallel. So it is my pleasure to introduce next up Dr. Melissa Byrne. Dr. Byrne received her osteopathic degree from Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine and holds a master's in public health from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Following graduation from anesthesiology residency at University of Michigan, she took a position in private practice in Williamsburg, Virginia, prior to returning to U of M for fellowship training in regional and ambulatory anesthesia, where she remained as clinical faculty until 2024. So this is recent, yes. Dr. Byrne currently holds the rank of clinical associate professor in the Department of Anesthesiology at UVA Health in Charlottesville, Virginia, and is the director of point of care ultrasound for the department. She'll be speaking on how to ace your interview. Please join me in welcoming with applause for Dr. Byrne.
Thank you for that lovely welcome. It is really incredible to see the number of people in the room this morning. And I love that there's such a wide range from medical students, current residents, program directors. It's just an awesome opportunity for us to get together and talk about some things that we often assume medical students, residents, even us as faculty have been, provided for at some point in our education, but are often unfortunately overlooked and really important skill sets for us to develop. So I'm going to speak specifically about interviews, and I have a lot of disclosures, none of which are financial of any nature. I will state I was the former associate PD at a large residency program that is currently playing a big football game and reigning national champions. However, I do not have any current conflicts of interest related to a residency program. I can state that I've interviewed at least 150 applicants for residency over the past 8 years. It's probably a lot more because many of those interviews are done informally in the operating room on a more regular basis. I've also interviewed for many faculty roles. And at my previous institution, we had what was known as a faculty interview group who underwent conscious bias training and departmental interview training to kind of provide us all with some basis for how we really and importantly evaluate candidates for any sort of role. Now, most of what I'm going to talk about today is emphasizing residency and fellowship program interviews, but as you can imagine, just as Dr. Bean has stated, these are really skills that we can extend. And as someone who has recently switched positions, I think I reflected on doing a lot of these things in just the last year alone. I did try to use beautiful AI for some imagery. I could spend a whole lecture about what that really looked like and how it may or may not have worked. But most importantly, I want to disclose that this talk is really my opinion. And I think that as there are many PDs here or former PDs in the audience, we may have some conflicting opinions about certain aspects, and that's great and certainly a grounds for discussion. So what is the real goal of any interview, right? I think when we're talking about residency or fellowship programs, you're trying to gauge how well you align with that given program. But also recognize that a key question you should be asking yourself is, can I really succeed in this program? Is it the supportive environment that I'm looking for and that I'm going to flourish in? And finally, as many have mentioned, you are really dual interviewing. The program is interviewing you, but you also are interviewing the program. Now, when we talk about timelines, I'm not throwing up specific dates. If we're speaking specifically about the NRMP, it roughly is for interviews October through January. I would say even 5 or 6 years ago, many applicants were having their interviews during that December to January timeline historically, but that really has shifted. And I think now even that November, maybe even late October into early December timeframe is when many people are seeing the bulk of their interviews. If we're talking about military matches, fellowship, again, these timelines are much more variable, whether they're ACGME fellowships or non-ACGME. So I don't want to speak specifically about timelines. And then again, if you're looking for something beyond your graduate medical education, you could be interviewing at any point in the year. And it may be as early as you met someone at a conference and the following Monday you're speaking with someone formally about a potential position. Now, as we've talked, there are many different types of interviews. The format or the level of technology can range from live in-person interviews. And yes, there are some programs that are offering these, but I would say the bulk of interview programs or programs interviewing at this point is doing a more live virtual scenario. Some places will hold hybrid interviews. I've seen this, in fact, for some fellowship programs. And rarely will you have the asynchronous virtual interview, although I imagine that many of you, even as medical students, may have submitted some type of recorded response to any sort of interview question. So what I'm mostly going to be talking about is the live virtual interview today. Who are the potential participants in that interview? Well, you're going to have someone representative of the program leadership. You'll probably meet some of the faculty that may or may not be programmatic leadership, but have some involvement in the educational process of a program's trainees. There may be panel type interviews. I know that when I interviewed, there were several places that they had a series of 3 interviewers that I was speaking to at any given time. There may actually be resident or fellow-led interviews that are separate from anything where a faculty member is present. And then also the somewhat scary group or homeroom type event, right? Where you may be in what's called a waiting room that traditionally may have been done in, let's say, a conference room while you waited to be escorted to a faculty member's office. But these are somewhat unstructured, informal interviews that are often undervalued by candidates. And so be sure that you understand that this is still part of the considered interview process. Now let's talk specifically about accepting and scheduling interviews. These are some important considerations for employing smart strategies related to accepting interviews. First of all, you have to think about time away from your education. Yes, we all know that this is a part of education, whether it's medical education, during medical school, or during your education time and training, but you have to try and minimize the amount of time you may be away from clinical duties. One, it impacts your colleagues that may have to pick up any additional shifts that you're missing if you're a resident to attend a fellowship interview, but also during medical school and training, right? This is time when you are supposed to be investing in becoming the best physician possible. And so if you're extending a significant amount of time to attend numerous interviews, you're missing out on those clinical opportunities. We've talked a lot about costs. Now, some of the shift towards virtual interviews was meant to minimize cost. I would love to see the data on how much medical students and residents are spending and see if there really is a cost improvement. Yes, you're traveling less, but again, we've looked at the numbers. People are applying to a large number of programs in order to obtain fellowship. And then we don't speak specifically of the other costs, the cost to have a computer, a working microphone, etc. And then time away from education that can't really necessarily have a monetary value on it, but certainly can be impactful. Make sure that you're seeking advice. Find mentors. Find peers that you feel like you can talk through the process with. Find former medical students from your program that were successful, gauge their interest. And Natalie's going to be talking shortly about finding these types of interactions. But also get support from academic advisors whenever possible that can give you a very realistic perspective on where you're going to be successful. And most importantly, prepare. And I spend several other slides talking about how we're going to prepare, but you really need to do your research even before sending out your applications. Now, I don't feel that I need to spend an extensive amount of time on canceling and rescheduling interviews, but I do think that one slide is important, right? That there needs to be some degree of etiquette. We all know that life happens and the need to cancel or reschedule may arise. Residency programs, fellowship programs recognize that these are events that can occur, and they expect some canceling and some rescheduling, but there's not a lot of flexibility. And I think as more and more applicants are being looked at through, different programs for residency and beyond, that the amount of time that is available for people to swap out dates is becoming increasingly more difficult. But canceling and rescheduling unprofessionally can have strong impacts, both for your reputation as well as future opportunities for that program or department should you seek to look for fellowship opportunity or even a job in that location. Under absolutely no circumstances should you be a no-show. Do not fail to attend a scheduled interview without prior notice. If you do feel that you need to cancel or reschedule, 2 weeks is typically seen as a reasonable amount of time, and you don't necessarily have to provide a lot of information about why exactly you're unable to attend. If that timeline is shorter, certainly a call to the program coordinator with a follow-up email to confirm your cancellation and or rescheduling are appropriate. And in that circumstance, I would say something to the extent of, this is the reason why I'm having to cancel, perhaps due to a family emergency or I'm sick, but do not go into specifics like, I'm sorry I was up vomiting every hour on the hour last night. We don't need to know that. So just be wise and thoughtful about how you approach this conversation, but also be respectful to the program itself for the amount of time that they've already invested in, one, reviewing your application, two, scheduling you on a date that had previously worked, three, any opportunities that they are taking to reschedule you in the event that they're available to do so. So I think this is a really important take-home point from today, and that's really that, you're saying yes and accepting an interview has a rippling effect on others, right? What this essentially means is that in the current residency application landscape, you may feel encouraged or even pressured, right, to apply to a very large number of programs and amass interviews because it keeps your options open. But many people see this as almost interview hoarding. And when taken to this extreme, this is just detrimental to the system at large. So given this context, it's important to recognize that your yes starts this chain of events. It affects you, it affects other applicants to the residency program or fellowship program that may or may not get an interview because you've accepted yes, even though you have a very, very low likelihood of even going to that program. Additionally, it can have impacts on your school. Should you no-show or cancel, last minute, that looks poorly upon your school and may impact future applicants from being given the opportunity to interview at that program. And then finally, other applicants to the program, it's just important that you recognize that this sets a precedent or a tone for what could potentially be problematic and ultimately lead to a lot of time and effort on the part of a program for offering interviews. So I've broken down my top 8 tips then for preparing for your interviews, as I mentioned, and we'll go into each one in a little bit more detail for the next few slides. So obviously you need to prepare, right? Do your research. Research the program, research its mission, its values, the departmental values, the curriculum, research the faculty that you may have their names in advance. What are their interests? Are they clinicians or are they researchers? Are they strong educators in the department? Do they do something nationally that's of interest to you? Review any recent developments or achievements by the program. Perhaps there's been an increase in their residency class size, or perhaps there's been an award of a large NIH funding that's of interest to you because you have some background in neuroscience, etc. Next, and this is probably, I think, one of the key takeaways from today, is be sure that you're always tailoring your responses during your interview to align with the program, but what really the program offers that interests you and what you're looking for in that residency or fellowship. And then, of course, we'll talk at length about testing your equipment. So just a few slides on testing your equipment. I think some of these things have been mentioned. I want to just give you a couple examples of things that are good and things that are not so good. So ring lights, I think, are very helpful. I mean, do a lot on social media. I've been on, webinars, etc. And when I was living in, the Mitten State, it gets dark very early and there's not a lot of appropriate sunlight. And so having a ring light to maybe provide, me looking a little bit more, a little bit better up on video camera is often helpful. But if you're wearing glasses and people can see the ring lights, it's distracting. So just test that out. If you don't have a ring light, just turn your computer towards the window, right, so that you're facing the window. But be wary because the sun changes. And I am guilty of this. When we interview, previously, it was from 8 in the morning until 5 at night, and the sun changes during that time. And by about 3:30 in the afternoon, the sun is literally in my eyes to the extent that one time I said I had to actually physically move my laptop to another room amidst an interview. And I think that just looks poorly on me and looking unprepared. Make sure that the background of your room is clean. Ceiling fans, believe it or not, on Zoom and other, video conferencing are very distracting. So just be mindful of that. And also that you don't have a lot of clutter, because that just, to me, as an interviewer, it just looks like you're really disorganized. And when I look at successful residents and fellows, they maintain a very organized operating room. Be wary about digital backdrops and even using blur. I think it works okay for persons that have shorter hair. But if you have hair like mine, just moving your head side to side with a blur on or a virtual background, it starts to look really weird. And it can be very distracting to your interviewer. I've seen people, my suspicion is that they tried to put up conversation props in the background. So they would have their wall, and on their wall there was a giant guitar, and then there was a giant it looked like an award from some sort of university for something or other. And while I appreciated that it was mostly organized, it just seemed a little fake to me. And I had read through the hobbies and interests, and things were, I was an NCAA, Division I athlete, blah, blah, blah. And I love to play the electric guitar. And I just thought it just feels so like staged. There was so much more in this individual's residency, application packet that I wanted to discuss, and I felt almost obligated to ask about those two things based on their background. So just be mindful that it can look a little too forced. Now, dress attire, this is important. I don't think it comes across to anyone like, please do not wear flannel pajama pants, because it'll be the one time that you do and you have a suit coat on that you need to turn around and address something that's fallen off the back wall. And I say that again because it happened in an interview I was conducting, that the individual stood up and there were the flannel pajama pants. So don't do that. Glasses, I've kind of mentioned, if you need to wear glasses, obviously it's important. Just try to minimize that ring light effect. Outside noise, pets, and roommates. Yes, I know many of you live in smaller apartments, or maybe, working in a cubicle provided by your institution. And so there is some point, sometime you're not able to necessarily minimize all things. The one that, again, I've been guilty of during different Zoom interactions is the lawnmower that decides it has to come cut the grass outside of my house while I'm trying to listen. And so some things are out of our control, and I think most interviewers recognize that there's a limit to what you can do. I did interview an applicant who may or may not have lived somewhere near Chicago, somewhere near the subway or the L or whatever. And every time something would come through, the screen was like shaking. And it was like shaking. And just as you had said with not using iPhones, right, because you're going to get sick to your stomach, I felt like I was going to get sick to my stomach during this interview. And again, I don't think the individual could necessarily plan for when the L was going to come through in their background, but it did make for a very interesting experience. So be careful about that. Internet connection, yes, it comes and it goes. I understand. I often will state at the beginning of a Zoom type interview is that if something should happen, I have your phone number. My number would be coming from an 810 area code. So just be sure to answer it and don't worry. And if that doesn't go through and we have to reschedule, please do not feel stressed about that. Okay. We can't all plan for every possible problem we could have with internet connectivity. And then some institutions, as I mentioned, will have like their own sponsored locations. So perhaps this is a cubicle, perhaps it's a place that has, strong Wi-Fi. This may be of interest to you. Recognize that the background's probably, a blank wall, and that's not a bad thing. But if you are going to use something like that, please be sure that you practice using it, even in informal settings, so that you're not, trying to figure out like, where is the camera on the computer that I'm using, etc. You can go on to a number of different websites, right, to get some ideas of how to, quote, Zoom your room, or Room Rater, right, where people during the pandemic were going through and stating like, oh, look at the Surgeon General's background. Couldn't he have straightened those books? So if you want some good ideas of how nice rooms are set up, this is an option, but please don't spend a ton of money staging your background. I think when it comes down to it, a really good applicant in any type of interview knows themselves. And so I think in the next month or so, between you submitting, an ARIS application, a fellowship application, et cetera, that you spend a lot of quality time thinking about who you are and what you want to project in your interview. So you should always know your application and know your personal statement. It basically should be something that you're able to almost reiterate without even looking at a piece of paper. What were those, memorable experiences that you listed, and why did you list those ones? What story does this tell about you, and what is it in your personal statement that you think the program needs to know about you? Be prepared to discuss your achievements. And what are those achievements? Perhaps they're things that wouldn't necessarily, come across as being a great success, but for you, for whatever reason, it's really important. I mean, I've seen individuals that they're the first person in their family, right, to graduate from high school. They're the first person in their family that was able to afford to go to, get an undergraduate degree, let alone go to medical school and beyond. These are important things that shape who you are. And so think about how you're going to portray that to an interviewer. Discuss your challenges. Again, this has been mentioned, but if you have any sort of red flags on your application, you need to be able to succinctly and sincerely describe what those are and how that has shaped who you are, what you have done to overcome, because what you learn from those events is more important than the events actually being on there, in my own opinion. And then finally, you can work on starting a STAR database, and I'll kind of give you just some ideas about how to do this in the next few slides. Be sure to practice common questions. You should know what are the most common things you're going to be asked in interviews and be able to effectively and again succinctly articulate an answer. Be able to discuss why it is you're choosing this specialty or subspecialty or this specific practice location. Highlight your interest in the specific program without sounding overly complimentary or that you're just reiterating what you heard during an open house. And then it's okay if you're asked about future career plans to be, honest. If you're not sure whether or not you actually want to do, cardiothoracic fellowship one day, you can just say, as a medical student, I've had the opportunity to be in an ICU. I did a chronic pain rotation, and I did a few days in the cardiac ORs, and I really enjoyed it. But I think I'll use the next couple of years to be open to kind of seeing where and my true passion is going to lie. Understand that there are many different question types, and every program is going to structure their interview very differently. There's going to be general questions. Again, these are the more like describe yourself broadly, discuss the research, and then discuss your interest in the specialty that I've mentioned. Some programs, including my former program, used a lot of behavioral-based interviewing questions or behavioral questions, where you're using prior experiences to really demonstrate a level of knowledge or specific skill and the extent of the experiences. And these are the ones I think you need to spend a little bit of time kind of researching. Often this information is found on like Reddit related to different programs and the types of interviews that they hold. And then know, that you may have situational questions describing what you should or would do in given hypothetical situations. Perhaps if you had witnessed someone making an error in the operating room, what would you do? So think about how you might structure an answer to those types of questions. So yes, there are many types. You want to practice these responses. You can do this, again, with your peers. You could do this with an academic advisor, perhaps a faculty member on an away rotation. I'm always happy to even just offer that, so don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you just want to say, I just need a little bit of help in practicing what I look like when I interview, but also how I answer certain questions. Use the format that you might encounter on an interview day. So if you're going to be using Zoom or other middleware, try to practice whenever possible so you're familiar with that, and it just takes away a little bit of the anxiety you may have about specific program use. And then many medical schools will offer mock interviews. Please take advantage of this whenever possible. So I would just encourage you to just take a picture of these slides. These are the most common questions that you will be asked about yourself. How would your friends describe you? Can you tell me about this deficiency on your record, as I mentioned, related to red flags? Why did you choose this specialty? Are you interested in academic medicine? Have you thought about fellowship? And then what really motivates you? So there's a ton of questions here. I'm not going to go through all of them or how I think you should answer them, but just things that you should start to think about. Here are another set of commonly asked questions. What do you think you could contribute to this program? How would you describe yourself? What's the one event you're proudest about in your past? What's the greatest sacrifice? And then the ever dreaded, what questions do you have for me? And I have a lot of questions you can screenshot in a short while of questions you can start to think about that you might have for programs. So I've mentioned the STAR database and the importance of identifying experiences in your past that can help you to really have strong and succinct answers to these more open-ended questions. So again, you're going to review your CV. You want to take this time to reflect on your experiences, but also reflect on what you've learned from them and find the, let's say, 3 best examples of things you've learned over the past 5 or so years. Your job then is to craft a very tailored response so that you have that kind of in your pocket and you can sound very professional, very well prepared, but don't sound like you've been, basically staging a whole interview. You want to make this come as authentically as possible. So for many of the behavioral-based questions, the STAR method is an approach that helps you to respond, wherein you as an applicant are essentially telling a story of a situation and providing the following information. You're going to provide the situation, so the circumstances around the example, how long ago it was, where did it occur? You're going to focus then on the task, like what was the specific task that was involved? Was it a medical school assignment, a project at work, a patient you cared for? And then what was the goal? The action, what did you specifically, others if applicable, but we're trying to shift from teamwork answers to you as an individual. What did you take or what did you do in that situation? And then finally, what was the outcome? Was it positive? Was it negative? It doesn't have to be the most happy example, but was it what you expected? And again, what did you really learn from the experience? And I like this slide. Basically, it gives you an idea of how much of your response should be based on each of these individual responses. So 20% related to situation, 10% about the task itself. The action should comprise about 60% of your response, and then the result being basically the last statement that you may make. So one common question that I have asked applicants in the past was, tell me about a time when you made a mistake. And I feel like this puts people really in the hot seat. And I know even for myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, so we've had this really pleasant conversation about how great I am in my research and my interest in point of care ultrasound. And now you want me to be negative Nelly about myself and kind of open myself to the panel or open myself to you, the programmatic leadership, about how terrible of a person I am. Don't think of it like that. This is your opportunity to be humble, to be yourself and genuine, but also just to be a human, right? And the ultimate goal is going to be, this thing happened to me, but I did something good with it. So I will put it out there that my experience that I think about most commonly related to a time I made a mistake was all the way back in intern year. That was 2010. Okay, but this still stands with me. And I think it's just overall an important experience that I had that I wouldn't necessarily put on my CV, right? But it's something that has defined myself and how I have improved my role as a clinician, but also has created me into the individual standing before you today. So if my interviewer said, Melissa, can you tell me about a time you made a mistake? I would take a few seconds. It's okay to kind of think through your head, right? And I would say, well, I remember very clearly one of my first rotations as an intern at the University of Michigan. I was in the ER and I was taking care of a patient who came in, and she came in with an acute onset of dyspnea. And I had went through her medical history and I went and talked to the attending. And while I was presenting the patient to the attending, we got called rapidly to the patient's room because the patient's saturations had dropped exceedingly low and we had to intubate her. And the attending walked into the room after we had intubated the patient, improved her saturations, and said, "You forgot to tell me the most important thing about this patient." And you're an intern, you're kind of deer in the headlights. And he said, "She just had a total knee arthroplasty. She just had surgery." And it didn't even dawn on me that perhaps the reason for this patient's acute desaturation was that she had a PE, and that this is something that didn't seem to me to be important, or I didn't recognize that my history taking and that my clinical skills examination, right, seeing a giant leg brace on the patient's knee, were so pivotal in narrowing that patient's diagnosis and leading to rapid treatment. But what did I take away from that? Well, one, it stayed with me even to this day. but 2, that the power of history and physical taking can really help to shape your diagnosis and is really an important skill set for anesthesiologists where we don't often have a lot of time in order to make decisions, right? So I told you something bad. I told you something that I think makes me sound more human in a very open setting. I recognize I made a mistake, but then I realized what that impact of that specific instance has been on me and how formative it has been in how I approach clinical medicine. Does that make sense? And yes, that's a true story. So, as you can see, being authentic is really important. Being genuine, this should be your North Star, as well as kindness and professionalism. I think all of these really just demonstrate to an interviewer that who you are across Zoom, no matter where you are in the country, where you are, what time of day it is, these things do lend themselves to Zoom formats. And also recognize that your fit within an institutional program and your contributions to the community, whether it's clinical contributions, service, education, maybe research, to me that is way more important than the number of publications you had on your ERAS application. Always, always, always demonstrate professionalism, your appearance, your accountability, and your respect for everyone that you encounter, including people like program coordinators, is really important. And I've seen applicants who were not ranked because of a poor interaction with a program coordinator. Now, I've talked about the questions that are more open-ended, things like, so what questions do you have for me? And you know that there's not a lot of time left. And so I think it's important that you have questions kind of in the back of your head that, one, are important to you to know the answer to, but also tailored specifically to certain items and also tailored to the person who's interviewing you. So, education questions. These are appropriate to ask of program directors or those clinicians who may be involved in the educational mission of a program, okay? So yes, you can ask some of these questions to current residents or current fellows, but be mindful that, you know, understanding what curriculum is available for the point of care ultrasound program at your institution probably isn't best addressed by the chair of the department. They probably just don't know these more specific answers. So think about who you're asking and whether that question is appropriate. Asking about attendance at national conferences, really important, right? Are there opportunities to do away program or away rotations, you know, or do you have structured rotations at other hospitals, and what is the benefit to doing so, or why did you choose to do that is important. Research opportunities, again, perhaps for programmatic leadership, but if you're being interviewed by a research faculty, always a good opportunity, and how to get involved in these if you're so interested. Clinical duties, be very careful about how you ask some of these questions. Again, these are probably better directed to the current trainees about what does their clinical day look like, but there are some things for what type that are appropriate for educational leadership, like supervision structures. Is there an appropriate balance between independence and supervision? Is there any sort of ancillary support system? Like, for example, in large hospitals, they may have a certified OB anesthesia nurse that's on when you're on your labor and delivery rotation. Be careful using the word scut work, right? When you're talking to program leadership, it just doesn't, in my opinion, come across very well. And that you're just seeking to find out how to make your job easy. And I'm not saying that because I don't think that there are programs that make you do a lot of scut work. It's just you have to be, again, very careful about the questions you ask and how you phrase them. I think this is really undervalued insofar as questions that can be answered of programmatic leadership, including evaluation and assessment. So how are residents evaluated? What is the structure of that evaluation? What other forms of feedback, though, do trainees get? You know, is it, you know, do they get their in-training exam performance? Do you have any other sort of systems, you know, or educational tests that you may offer for residents to gauge how well they may be able to do on the basic exam or beyond? And then what support structures are in place for those that may be in academic need? Program performance, much of this is available data that you can have even before, but things that you might want to ask about are what % of your graduates pass the specialty boards? Where do your graduates go? Do they go into fellowship, academics, etc.? And where do they end up going? And then employment questions, these are good questions if you're in a homeroom setting and you have the program coordinator that may be able to give you more specifics about benefits, whether there's a union available, is it mandatory to join the union, are there moonlighting opportunities, and what does that look like? And then questions that you can ask current residents, strengths and weaknesses, relationships with faculty, relationships amongst each other. Afterwards, you can certainly send emails or even personalized notes to those that have interviewed you. I wouldn't expect anything back. As a former interviewer, I would get a lot of these, and I just didn't really have the time. And then also keeping in line with some of the rules surrounding interactions and communication. You have to be very careful as a program leader that you're not violating any of those rules and regulations. Most importantly, though, right, you need to stay calm, because the face that you're putting forth on Zoom or whatever platform you're using is what I imagine I will see in an operating room setting, or I have to suppose. So if you seem very flustered, I think for an interviewer, they're then considering what's it going to be like at 3 a.m. working with you and the patient's decompensating. So just be mindful that it's okay to take a breather. It's okay to have a sip of water if you're getting dry, but just be very assured in who you are, why you're there, and what it is you want to get out of your interview. These are just a few more do's and don'ts. Just things that I, have seen in the past is that oftentimes applicants will put their home program first in the list of their interviews, just because it gives them a chance for feedback, but also to use as kind of a practice. But don't approach it as it is a practice. It is a full-on interview. So take it seriously, but use it as an opportunity to really hone those interview skills. And then again, don't be rude, don't be late. We don't want any jerks in any sort of program, right? That's the overarching theme. And be wary about asking programmatic leadership about quality of life issues, or talking about other programs and what you think might be beneficial at some other program that you don't necessarily see in the one you're interviewing for. So as the season ends up, most of them will not send you a thank you letter or an acknowledgement. Most will not respond to your emails. Do not take that as a personal assault. If you truly have a definite number one, and there may be some, differing opinions here, it's okay for you to tell them that you are ranking them number one, but I put a major caveat on this. This has to be as long as it is true. I will give you the example that we had an applicant to the residency program who had emailed and said, I am ranking you number one. They were in a rank to match position. They did not rank at our institution. So we all recognize that individual did not list us number one. And honestly, that's okay. But then again, came to us for fellowship and said, I will be ranking your program number one. Did not rank in a rank to match position. And then, third time's the charm, said that they wanted to come and work as faculty at the institution. Guess what? That individual was not hired, right? So just be careful that if you're going to send this, that you need to be honest. And then if there are second look visits, those are, a good option for you to get a better feel about culture. Many programs, including my former program, did those after the rank list had been certified. So there was no bearing on your rank list order, but just an opportunity for you to get more experience and research in that program itself. So debriefing is really important in anything that we do, whether it's crisis management in the OR, but also throughout this process. And so there are questions you should be frequently and repeatedly asking yourself. Am I going to be happy in this program? Am I going to be confident in the program supporting me as an individual? Are there other factors that may make this place more desirable? And are there other things that you consider important in your priority list for how you feel you're going to be best supportive? And when it all comes down to it, right, gut reaction is really important. I remember as a medical student, I actually had an Excel worksheet, and for every program that I interviewed at, I wrote down the number of liver transplants they did, the number of X, Y, or Z that they did, the number of fellowships they had. And to be quite honest, I don't even think I looked at it after I had made it for the last one. I basically decided that the program that I was going to match at had to fit my learning style, had to be supportive of me as an individual, and provide me with opportunities down the road. And so really it came down to my gut. These are some resources, and I'm happy to take any questions. Although taking too much time.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. For the sake of time, if you have any questions, I hope you know Dr. Byrne is an incredible resource, even for me, as a learner and an anesthesiologist on faculty. So if you haven't heard of Natalie Coons, I think you would be shocked if half of you haven't, but Dr. Coons, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Natalie Coons, graduating from the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, and is a research track anesthesiology resident at Stanford University. She completed multiple appointments as a research fellow at the United States Army Institute of Surgical Research, where she developed her background in human integrative physiology. She was a 2020 participant in the FAIR MSARF program under the mentorship of Dr. Soban Umar at the University of California, Los Angeles. She has a profound interest in maternal health as it relates to the high-risk and cardiac obstetric patient populations with the goal of becoming an OB anesthesiologist. As an early career investigator, she has published over 20 papers, book chapters, and other societal articles, and continues her leadership efforts to advance mentorship and education among medical trainees. She'll be speaking on mentorship and sponsorship, career advice for trainees. Please help me welcome, with applause, Dr. Coons.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mean, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so honored to be here today to speak to all of you. This topic is one that I'm super passionate about and started my interest as a first-year medical student. I'd also like to thank my mentor, Dr. Alessia Cretaroli. She cannot be here today. She's also a graduate of the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine, and she's been a mentor and a sponsor specifically for this talk to me throughout my training as a medical student and now as a resident as well. I have no disclosures. So the learning objectives for this talk is to describe the purpose of mentorship in medical training, specifically in medical school and early on in residency, define what a mentee is, discuss the differences between mentorship and sponsorship, identify appropriate mentorship and sponsorship as a trainee, and summarize some important pearls that I've learned throughout medical school and now as a early CA1 at Stanford. So the Science of Effective Mentoring in STEM, published by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, defined mentorship as a professional working alliance in which individuals work together over time to support the personal and professional growth, development, and success of their relational partners through the provision of career and psychosocial support. So this is kind of a wordy definition, but the takeaway is that medical students and residents need formal training, specifically in anesthesiology. And one of my motivating factors for getting involved so heavily in mentorship and sponsorship as an early first-year medical student was I came into medical school being interested in anesthesia pretty early on from experiences that I had as an undergrad and a research fellow. And I couldn't find the necessary resources available to get involved in anesthesia early on in medical school. We had an anesthesia interest group that consisted of 2 people back in 2019 when I was a first-year medical student. And actually talking to some of the recent medical students at the University of New England, the anesthesia interest group is now over 100 students. So as you all know, anesthesia, the interest in anesthesia has significantly increased over the past 5-6 years and is continuing to go in that trajectory. And so mentorship and sponsorship in anesthesia are crucial for career development. So some mentorship values. One can gain specific life experiences and perspectives, backgrounds, unique pathways to medicine and anesthesia, career perspectives, networks and referrals, knowledge of current systems and processes, and the ability to offer additional opportunities that you may not have sought out yourself. As a medical student at an osteopathic medical school, it's often hard to find mentorship in anesthesia, and this was, again, one of my motivating factors for running and proposing my career development initiative as the former ASA medical student component president from 2020 to 2022. And it was really through these efforts of creating resources for medical students where we could supplement a lot of these values that may be available to other students consultants from schools who have specific anesthesia departments that are affiliated with their university to help osteopathic medical school students specifically, as well as other students who don't have access to a lot of resources, to learn about both the specialty, subspecialties, as well as different career development advice. So mentoring. The components of mentoring involve kind of this 8-arm view. So motivation. You have to have motivation from both the mentee and the mentor in a required working relationship. Success. What are the mentee's personal goals, and what are the achievements and the successes of the mentor that make them equipped to mentor that student? Direction. What direction does the mentee hope to take the relationship? Is it for career development? Is it for a specific skill? Is it for a specific presentation? And be open to constructive feedback during this process. Coaching. Coaching is specifically aimed at a goal. Is that a grant application, an award, again, in a specific presentation? Seeking out coaching for these specific endeavors is important if that's your goal. Support. Is there support from both your mentor, your institution, your network? Making sure that you have all of the appropriate support devices in place to succeed. Goals. There should be multiple goals within the mentorship and sponsorship relationship, both from the mentee by taking that initiative, but also from the mentor to help the mentee achieve those goals. So who are the best mentors? There's a paper out of Anesthesia and Analgesia by Dalio et al. Titled Assuring the Groundwork for Success, Mentorship, Sponsorship, and Allyship for Practicing Anesthesiologists. And I referred to this paper a few times during the presentation, but they note that mentorship focuses on personal growth and professional development, particularly related to building skills as well as setting and achieving goals. An effective mentor is an advisor who shares their expertise and provides feedback. Therefore, a mentor's effectiveness does not depend on their rank or position within a department, institution, or organization. So who are the best mentors? Mentors are individuals you resonate with, personality matches, people that you get along with. They can be educators, professors, research PIs, other residents, other students, and then also individuals who are not in the medical field at all. During my medical school experience, I had many different types of mentors who were in anesthesia, mentors who were in research, but also I relied heavily on non-medical mentors, especially during my residency application process, to read personal statements, read specific statements that I was putting on my ERS application. Specifically one, my friend who is an archaeologist and an excellent writer, read over my personal statement multiple times for grammar, flow, excitement. Am I able to get my point across? And I think having those people in your career early on are important. And then some pitfalls. Oftentimes I have medical students come up to me saying, oh, I've done a lot of ENT research, or I had an opportunity to do a hospice rotation through my medical school, or I had an opportunity to publish a book chapter on radiation oncology, but I want to apply to anesthesia. How do you suggest I proceed with these interests or things that I've already done? And I think the students who do not take those opportunities because it's not, quote unquote, in their field of interest are actually doing themselves a disservice. All of these opportunities that you're presented with, no matter what specialty they are in, are valuable skills for anesthesia. Anesthesia is such a versatile specialty. We take care of cancer patients, we take care of ENT patients, we take care of a variety of patients that the experiences you have in medical school are giving you those skills to be a good clinician, a good anesthesiologist. And so I often tell students that taking these opportunities, one, you may never know what kind of mentorship will come out of that opportunity. Like it's said multiple times today, the world is very small. And so you never know, that individual may know somebody who's connected with somebody in anesthesia. Or it could be a really great lifelong mentor for other non-professional goals or personal goals. Some other pitfalls are finding somebody who doesn't always necessarily have the bandwidth to mentor. it could be a high academic load, a chair of a department who doesn't have the energy to really give you a good mentorship relationship. And I think realizing that as a student and being cognizant of their workload and kind of looking outside to find additional mentorship in addition to that person is smart. And then not being able to be your authentic self. Again, a concept that has come up multiple times today, but this is just so important because these are going to be the people who you rely on for career advice in the future. And if you're not able to be your full authentic self with that individual or individuals, then the relationship really isn't going to go too far. So setting personal and professional commitments. As one forms a mentoring relationship, there's often this honeymoon period in the beginning because of perceived optimism between the two individuals. However, it's really important to explicitly align your expectations and your commitments with one another early on. So many of these commitments, as you know, happen organically, but I think this is a really good guideline for creating mentorship relationships moving forward in your career. So setting specific expectations that you're able to go back and reflect on. I've now been mentoring some medical students myself, and I've actually used a lot of these guidelines in order to create an organized relationship, but something that's beneficial for the student. And creating a written template of those specific goals from the medical student can help both the student and the mentor make sure that they are achieving what is wanted to be achieved. Also, defining what the relationship will be. Some people may expect or desire a short-term relationship, again, for a specific event, whether that's residency applications, a presentation, a poster presentation. Others may expect a longer-term relationship that lasts, through medical school, into residency, and even on as early career faculty. So communicating these expectations is important and can organically evolve as the relationship evolves. Mentors can act as both professional and personal mentors. So again, aligning those goals and discussing the scope for the relationship. And then as a mentee, coming prepared with questions, objectives, and the mentor also coming prepared with answers and specific next steps. So some responsibilities specifically for mentors are committing appropriate time to the mentee, being available, maintaining contact, protecting confidentiality, helping mentee develop professional goals, and being non-judgmental. Responsibilities of the mentee are taking initiative. I think this is one of the biggest responsibilities of a mentee. Often medical students come up to me saying, oh, how do I find a mentor? I want these types of things in a mentor, but I think the first step is taking initiative, being open-minded to mentor's perspective. And again, another concept that's come up, as you can see, all of these things are very important for career development, is being coachable. As a mentee, proposing goals for each meeting, communicating your needs to that mentor, maintaining contact, being coachable, and again, being yourself. I think it's also important to consider aligning your goals with your mentor's goals. Sometimes you may need to consider finding a new mentor if their perspective or their experience does not align with you. And this can be really difficult because it could be a faculty member at a program that you really desire, or it could be a resident, again, at another program where you may want to work someday. But I think listening to yourself and listening to that kind of internal voice that you may hear and having an honest discussion with that individual will only help you in the future. So sponsorship. Sponsorship is an action or process in which someone generally, though not exclusively, with more influence and power than the person they are sponsoring, facilitates an opportunity for an individual that might lead to career benefits, including, but not limited to, accomplishments required for academic rank promotion, and that can be documented on a CV. So this word I heard for the first time as a FAIR MSARF fellow back in 2020. This was right when the pandemic hit, and so this is an opportunity for medical students to go to a host institution and do clinical or bench research. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, our cohort was not able to go in person. And so Dr. Harriet Huff, the director at the time, created a virtual experience for all of the fellows this year. And this was more of a career development curriculum where we heard from multiple faculty from multiple institutions about different topics, becoming an academic anesthesiologist. And this was the first time I had heard this word sponsorship before. And specifically used in relation to academic career. And so I was already in my head kind of identifying individuals who were acting as sponsors for me, but it was never explicitly taught or said that this person was a sponsor. And I think being educated around kind of these words and these relationships is really important for career advancement. I was actually just talking to a colleague the other day who is now going to be a pediatric oncologist attending at the University of Washington. And he had I was telling him about this talk, and he had told me that he had just heard and learned what the word sponsor meant a few months ago. And so I think having the knowledge as a medical student and growing your career as a resident, having the knowledge of what these relationships are and who in your life are acting as these individuals is important to move forward. So sponsorship values, they can enhance your visibility, credibility, professional networking. A sponsor is someone who is well established in their career. They can actively promote the mentee, introducing them to their own professional network, providing opportunities, and is critical to career advancement. There was a survey of 903 faculty at the University of California, San Francisco, and 87% of respondents reported receiving at least one discrete act of sponsorship in their career, and 60% identified sponsorship as being important to their career success through gaining leadership positions, promotions, and visibility. So I think sponsorship is a huge aspect to career advancement. And again, identifying those appropriate individuals who you resonate with that can be sponsors are going to push the envelope. So what is allyship? Allyship is the supportive association with another person or group, specifically such association with members of a marginalized or mistreated group to which one does not belong. So this also comes from that paper from ANA in Dalio et al., noting cross-cultural relationships between colleagues in the workplace allow for allyship to occur. Aligned with its similar mentee-mentor relationship theme, allyship focuses on the ally status within clinical practice, organization, academia, specialty, or society at large. Allyship capitalizes on how the power afforded by the intersections of the ally's various identities can be used in ways that impact the mentee's opportunities, experiences, and successes. So again, this concept of being your authentic self in the workplace has come up again, and again. And if we can practice allyship in our relationships with mentors and sponsors, then we can increase the number of opportunities and experiences that trainees seek out. And there's evidence-based practices for allyship specifically in anesthesiology, and this graph comes from that paper. But again, the most common question I get from medical students is, but how do I find a mentor? So I threw a lot of technical material about what mentorship and sponsorship is, because I think education around it is important, and we often don't get that in medical school. But how to find mentorship as a trainee. So there's no right or wrong way to find mentorship. I think utilizing your network is going to be the most important thing. When I was a first-year medical student, I was already reaching out to current residents, program leadership, especially when I got involved with the ASA, just trying to meet as many people as I could, listen to their journey to anesthesia, listen to their perspectives, and over the years started growing this network of individuals. And I think now, as a resident at Stanford, I have mentors and sponsors all throughout the country that are both faculty members, other residents, students, and now myself mentoring medical students interested in anesthesia has kind of come full circle. Oftentimes, you may need to seek connections outside of your network, specifically in osteopathic medical schools. Again, a lot of the medical schools are not associated with home institutions. And so seeking out additional mentorship, whether that's through your state society. This was something that I had done as a medical student, not really knowing where to turn to find anesthesiologists to talk to. And so I had reached out to the Maine Society of Anesthesiologists pretty early on in medical schools at first year and asked to just sit in on their business meetings. And this was an opportunity for me to go not only meet anesthesiologists in the state, but also hear what they talk about in business meetings. Now, I had absolutely no knowledge about what takes place during these meetings. And frankly, as a first-year medical student, didn't understand what was happening. But it was a really great networking opportunity to kind of put myself out there and be like, hey, I'm a medical student at the University of New England. I'm interested in anesthesia. How can I build my network just within my state? And then from there on, created a medical student section, and now about 10 to 15 medical students attend their business meetings every fall and spring, which is really cool to see. And they've even created their own opportunities to present cases, to work with residents, and again, build that network for now other medical students who are interested in the specialty. Again, I think it starts with introspection, identifying your personal and professional goals and who you want those individuals to be a part of your team. Again, taking initiative, it's the biggest thing on this list here, as you can see, it's bolded. But I think where students kind of mess up in trying to find a mentor is just being vulnerable and kind of stepping out of your comfort zone. I would consider myself an introvert at heart. And I think the hardest thing for me early on as a medical student, even sometimes now, is going up to individuals at a conference, introducing yourself, saying, hi, I'm a medical student, I'm interested in anesthesia. I remember this one specific situation. I was a third year medical student at the ASA conference, and there was one specific principal investigator. I really wanted to listen to her talk and then talk to her after her talk. And going up to her after her talk was the most nerve-wracking thing I had done up to my career that far. And you almost feel like you're stalking them because I'm looking up her schedule, I'm looking when she's going to talk, where she'll be, and that conversation led to other research opportunities that I didn't even know were possible, and she is still one big component of where I am today and a mentor. Not specifically at Stanford. So again, having mentors kind of all over the place and from all different specialties. Mentorship and sponsorship are just part of the equation. There's, like we talked about today, so many things that affect career development, specifically for anesthesia. So these are just two aspects of career advancement. Diversifying your skills, experience, and network, and again, stepping out of your comfort zone. And I think also not forgetting those people who may not be in anesthesia, but still are significant mentors in your life. My first mentor of medical school was a PhD geriatrician who is still one of my biggest supporters, biggest sponsors, and biggest mentors. And if it weren't for her, there would be a lot of opportunities I wouldn't have been granted. And so taking into consideration that you may have all of these individuals in your life that have no relationship to anesthesiology at all, but it's how you interact with these individuals, how you create those relationships that will then later reflect on the relationships that you create in your career. One program out of the University of Utah called Utah Coaching Advancement Network. This was created from a grassroots faculty effort back in 2018. That is now a cohort-based coaching program that is involved actually in the part of the medical school curriculum. So medical schools around the country are slowly, incorporating mentorship and sponsorship curriculum into the medical school teachings. I never had this as a medical student. But I think it's really cool. And they created these modes of developmental relationships where basically you have externally driven and internally driven relationships by also having mentoring, sponsorship, coaching, and advising, and having them all come together. And I think each part of them is very specific and has very specific goals, but when you use them together, can create many specific opportunities and career choices. So just some personal experience with mentorship and sponsorship. I had a very non-traditional background coming into medicine. I was a dance major at a very small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, and got injured. Had my own personal surgical experience with an anesthesiologist who is now retired, but again, still is one of my biggest fans and mentors. I then did a research fellowship with the military, and again worked with a lot of anesthesia providers, emergency medicine personnel, and then I was accepted to the University of New England. Again, going into medical school, I was very interested in anesthesia, and so seeking out mentorship early was important to me, but I just didn't know how or where. And so again, part of my motivation of creating the Career Development Initiative through the ASA Medical Student Component, which I hope many of you have used a lot of their resources in your own kind of anesthesia discovery. And now as a resident, giving back and mentoring medical students myself. These are just some mentorship and sponsorship resources, which you guys should all have the slides. Just different ways of looking up mentorship opportunities. There is a program called Me Mentors, a community of healthcare professionals and students throughout the country committed to mentoring aspiring health professionals. There is Together We Mentor. This is to increase interest among underrepresented minority groups in anesthesiology specifically with early career exposure. F1 Doctors is a program to provide free guidance to international applicants. And then the ASA Mentorship Program also have a plug for that. I was part of the group that kind of helped create the pilot program of the ASA Mentorship Program, and now it's a web-based program where you basically fill out a survey of all your interests, and they match you up with either a faculty or a resident, depending on your specific needs and interests, with a faculty or resident mentor. And then I'll also put a plug for social media. When I was a second-year medical student and got involved with FAIR MSARF, my mentor, Dr. Soban Umar, one of the first things he asked me was if I had a Twitter. And I said, yeah, in high school, but I deleted that long ago. And this was my first introduction to med Twitter and networking with anesthesiologists on Twitter. And I remember, I had some medical student friends who thought it was a really dumb idea to get on Twitter and self-promote some of the projects that you may have completed and network through social media. But I will say it has been a game changer for creating your network and also just connecting with individuals at conferences just like this. And so I do urge you to get on social media. A lot of residency programs now have Twitter and Instagram to promote their culture and showcase what their residents are doing, just due to the virtual nature of interviews. And so getting on there, reaching out to residents via direct message, I think are all appropriate ways to connect with residents who at programs where you may be interested in. Also, contacting residency programs, program coordinators, and asking if any residents are interested in talking to prospective students. I know I had reached out to many individuals from multiple programs, students, both medical students, residents, and faculty at those programs to get a sense of what the culture is, get some pros and cons of my own when looking at residency programs. And I think it was really helpful to get a variety of different perspectives from the same program, because there are going to be things that people like at programs and there are going to be things that people don't like, but you're the judge and the one making your own pros and cons list when it comes down to residency program ranking. And so having the variety of information from talking to all of these people was super helpful, but not only information for programs, you then create more contacts to grow your network. So just to revisit the learning objectives, describe the purpose of mentorship, describe what a mentee is, discuss the differences between mentorship and sponsorship, and summarize some important pearls from my own personal experiences. Thank you to my mentors. This is Dr. Soban Umar at a conference in, this was ASA in San Diego, actually. And I think it's just super important. Again, we said remember your please and thank yous during interview season, but also remember your thank yous to all the individuals who got you to where you are today, because I think it takes a village, and I would not be here without my village. Here's some references, and the first step of mentorship is connecting. So let's connect. If you guys have any questions about additional mentorship, sponsorship questions, or just application advice in general, I'm happy to chat afterwards. Thank you.